Chapter 1898. Along with the appearance of those terrifying auras, 16 super experts appeared. Among them, there were 3 seamless Dao experts, and the rest were all seamless realm experts. Nagaching looked at the old man in the lead and frowned. Ancient clan. Ancient clan. This was also a super force, and its strength was no weaker than the Na Celestial clan. Shuetong glanced at the Nine Heavens clan patriarch, and continued to lick her candied fruit. The Nine Heavens clan patriarch looked at Yi Xian and smiled. Young Master Yi, the temptation of your bloodline is too great. Old man, you've lived for so many years, and you've lived long enough. If you can't break through and reach the divine spirit realm, there's no point in continuing to live. So, I want to give it a try. Yi Xian nodded. Understood. The Nine Heavens clan patriarch laughed, and then looked at Nagaching. Patriarch Qing, your Na Celestial clan's bloodline has reached a bottleneck, and breaking through is as difficult as ascending to the heavens. This human before you is an opportunity for your Na Celestial clan. So long as you devour his bloodline, your Na Celestial clan will definitely rise to a higher level and achieve glory. Nagaching glanced at Yi Xian, and then he smiled. No. Nine Heavens clan patriarch, I Nagaching have no ambition. I just want to lead my clan and live well. Please. The Nine Heavens clan patriarch smiled. I won't force you. As he spoke, he looked at Shuetong. What about you? Shuetong didn't speak. The Nine Heavens clan patriarch wanted to say something, but the ancient clan patriarch suddenly smiled. Say no more. The two of them want this human's bloodline and the divine items in the divine spirit palace, but they are afraid of wolves in front and tigers behind. Why should we cooperate with them? As he spoke, he looked at Yi Xian. Young Master Yi, you have no enmity with the ancient clan, but the power of your bloodline is too tempting, so I'm sorry for offending you. As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly disappeared on the spot. At the same time, the experts beside him also rushed out. Yi Xian stood on the spot, and when the ancient clan patriarch arrived in front of Yi Xian, a sword ray suddenly appeared. Boom! Before anyone could react, the Gu clan patriarch was sent flying hundreds of thousands of feet away, and as soon as he stopped, his body instantly shattered. As for the ancient race experts that had rushed towards Yi Xian, other than 2 seamless experts, the rest were all killed. Everyone was dumbfounded. Nagaching took a deep look at the sword slave in front of Yi Xian, and his eyes flashed with fear and shock. He never thought that the guard of the Divine Spirit Temple would actually follow Yi Xian. How did this guy do it? Blood-Eye glanced at Yi Xian, but didn't say anything. On the other side, the patriarch of the Nine Heavens clan had an extremely ugly expression on his face. Why are the guards of the Divine Spirit Palace following Yi Xian? In the distance, the ancient race leader looked at Yi Xian in disbelief. Why is the Sacred Spirit Palace guard following you? Yi Xian thought for a moment and said, Personal charm. The ancient race leader raged. Bullshit. At this moment, the sword slave suddenly disappeared on the spot. Hiss. Before the Gu clan's patriarch could react, a sword had pierced through his forehead. Although the gap between the seamless Dao and the half-step divine spirit realm wasn't as huge as the divine spirit realm, it was still like heaven and earth. When they saw this, the remaining 2 seamless Dao experts turned around and ran, but they were just about to run when 2 rays of sword light slashed their bodies. Boom! 2 powerhouses of the seamless Dao were directly killed. They didn't even have the strength to fight back. Looking at this scene, Yi Xian could not help but look at Shuetong, who was at the side. Back then, Shuetong had taken a blow from the sword slave head-on. However, Shuetong did not die, and his physical body did not even shatter. It seemed that although Blood-Eye was, this chapter is not finished, please continue to the next page. Although he was also a seamless Dao expert, his strength was much stronger. No, this guy was hiding his strength. Yi Xian couldn't help but look at Blood-Eye, and Blood-Eye grinned. At this moment, the Nine Heavens clan's patriarch suddenly said, Young friend, I am willing to follow you and serve you. Yi Xian suddenly smiled and said, Are you worthy? As soon as he finished speaking, the sword slave disappeared on the spot. Hiss! A sword pierced through the Nine Heavens clan's patriarch's forehead. Just as the sword slave was about to destroy the Nine Heavens clan's patriarch, Blood-Eye suddenly said, "You can devour his bloodline." Yi Xian hesitated for a moment, then appeared in front of the Nine Heavens clan's patriarch and slapped his shoulder. Bang! The Nine Heavens clan's patriarch's body shattered and blood gushed out. Yi Xian opened his right hand, and the blood flowed into his palm. Soon he absorbed all the blood. A moment later, Yi Xian frowned and looked at Blood-Eye. There's no reaction. Blood-Eye glanced at Yi Xian and didn't say anything. Yi Xian was puzzled and wanted to ask more questions. At this moment, Nagaching suddenly smiled and said, "Young Master Yi, the reason you didn't react is because his bloodline is too weak." "No, it's because your bloodline is too strong. His bloodline has no effect on yours." "Too strong?" Yi Xian smiled and said, "You too, I have to take my leave." Blood-Eye suddenly said, "What did you get?" Nagaching looked at Yi Xian. He was also curious about what Yi Xian had encountered in the Divine Spirit Palace. Yi Xian blinked. "I'm not telling you." After saying that, he turned and left. Blood-Eye suddenly said, "I'll go with you." Yi Xian turned and looked at Blood-Eye. "Go with me?" Blood-Eye nodded. Yi Xian was silent for a moment, then said, "All right." He decided to take Blood-Eye with him, because he needed his help now. Although he had the inheritance of Divine Sect, his realm was too low. If there was someone to guide him, he could improve even faster. At this moment, Nagaching suddenly said, "Young Master Yi, if you have time in the future, please come to the Nashin clan as a guest." Yi Xian smiled. "All right." Nagaching cupped his fists. "See you later." Yi Xian nodded, then turned and left with Blood-Eye. After Yi Xian and Blood-Eye left, Nagaching heaved a sigh of relief. In fact, he had thought of killing Yi Xian just now. However, after seeing how calm Yi Xian was, that thought disappeared without a trace. What did it mean to be so calm in front of so many powerhouses? It meant that he had nothing to fear. And his guess was correct. After a moment, the corner of Nagaching's mouth raised slightly. "Ancient clan. Nine Heavens clan. Now this divine universe belongs to the Nashin clan." After saying that, he turned and left. To some extent, the Nashin clan was the biggest winner. On the other side, in the starry sky, Yi Xian was flying on his sword with Blood-Eye by his side. About half an hour later, Yi Xian looked around. This place was a dead star field, very quiet, suitable for cultivation. Yi Xian sat cross-legged on the ground and looked at the storage ring on his finger. The next moment, a white light entered his brow. Boom! In an instant, countless information poured into his mind. Inheritance. Divine Sect inheritance. On the side, Blood-Eye glanced at Yi Xian, then turned to look at the end of the starry sky. No one knew what he was thinking. After a long time, Yi Xian's body suddenly surged out. "This chapter is not finished, please continue." A powerful aura appeared, causing the surrounding starry sky to tremble. Blood-Eye looked at Yi Xian. Yi Xian suddenly took out countless soul crystals and began to absorb them like crazy. About 10 days later, Yi Xian's aura suddenly soared. Boom! As the starry sky around him fluctuated, Yi Xian reached the 16th phase. Yi Xian was about to rush to the next phase when Blood-Eye suddenly said, "If you continue like this, your realm will be unstable, and there will be many hidden dangers." Yi Xian looked at Blood-Eye. "Then what should I do?" Blood-Eye said, "Whether your realm is stable or not depends on your use of the Tao of Spacetime. You have reached the 16th phase, but your mastery of the Tao of Spacetime is still on the low side. You should familiarize yourself with each layer of spacetime and master them." Yi Xian said solemnly, "Please advise me, Miss Blood-Eye." Blood-Eye nodded. She opened her palm and lightly swept it. In an instant, she and Yi Xian directly entered the 7th layer of spacetime. Blood-Eye said, "You can perfectly fuse with the 6th layer of spacetime. There is no need to familiarize yourself with the 6th layer of spacetime and below. We will start from the 7th layer of spacetime. Now feel the spacetime pressure around you." Yi Xian looked around with an incomparably solemn expression. He didn't dare to move at all. If not for Blood-Eye, he might have been crushed as soon as he entered the 7th layer of spacetime. The spacetime pressure of the 7th layer of spacetime was at least 100 times stronger than the 6th layer. Blood-Eye looked at Yi Xian. It's very simple. Fuse with the 7th layer of space-time, then overlap the 1st to 7th layers of space-time, and use it in your sword skills. This way, the power of your sword skills will increase countless times. Yi Xian frowned slightly. 1st to 7th layers of space-time? Blood-Eye nodded. Yi Xian said solemnly, I can only overlap the 1st to 5th layers of space-time. Blood-Eye said, if you can't overlap multiple space-time, even if you reach the 20th layer, you are still an ant. Yi Xian looked at Blood-Eye. The Gu clan patriarch is also a seamless path cultivator, and so are you. However, the gap between you and him is very big. Is this the reason? Blood-Eye nodded. Yi Xian fell silent. The reason he could fuse with the 6th layer of space-time was because of the green profound sword. But now he didn't have the green profound sword. Thinking of this, Yi Xian's expression changed greatly. He suddenly realized that he was actually relying on the green profound sword to such an extent. Without the green profound sword, what should he do? Thinking of this, Yi Xian suddenly broke out in cold sweat. He finally knew why his father had sealed the green profound sword. If he did not seal the Qingxian sword, he would never be able to leave the Qingxian sword. And that was the strength of the Qingxian sword, not his own strength. Thinking of this, Yi Xian felt a lingering fear. Fortunately, his father had sealed the green profound sword. Otherwise, he was afraid that he would be enslaved by the sword in the future. Having a strong sword and a weak person was not a good thing. Beside him, Blood-Eye suddenly said, you have to try to fuse with the 7th layer of space-time, and then grasp it. As for the realm, it's actually not particularly important. The so-called realm is just a kind of restraint. Yi Xian nodded. Understood. Saying that, he slowly closed his eyes and began to feel the 7th layer of space-time. Without the Qingxian sword, would he be unable to cultivate normally? He didn't believe it. When this thought arose, a powerful sword intent suddenly appeared on Yi Xian's body. Ever since he obtained the green profound sword, his swordsmanship had not improved for a long time. But Yi Xian didn't notice that in his sea of consciousness, the green profound sword was also trembling slightly. Yi Xian didn't know that the green profound sword's strength did not rely on absorbing souls, but on absorbing his sword intent. The sword was strong because of the person. End of this chapter. Chapter 1899. The sword grew stronger because of its owner. In the past, Yi Xian had always been relying on the green profound sword, and his strength had dropped by at least 80% without it. That was why the green-clothed man had sealed the green profound sword. When he understood this, the sword intent around Yi Xian grew stronger and stronger, and it caused the deathly silent starry sky in the surroundings to seethe. Xue Tong's brows knit together slightly when he witnessed this scene. This fellow seems to have attained sudden enlightenment. Sudden enlightenment. It was rare for one to attain sudden enlightenment in one's life. But once one did, then it might change one's life. Right at this moment, Yi Xian's sword intent entered the 7th level of space, and the spatial pressure there wasn't able to crush his sword intent. Conversely, his sword intent had actually fused into one with the 7th level of space under his control. Xue Tong frowned when he witnessed this scene. What's going on? The 7th level of space doesn't reject sword intent? When she thought up to here, she opened her palm and suddenly clenched it. In an instant, a strand of fist intent entered the 7th level of space. However, it vanished without a trace as soon as it entered the 7th level of space. Xue Tong couldn't help but gaze at Yi Xian when he witnessed this scene, and his eyes were filled with curiosity. However, he didn't disturb Yi Xian at this moment, because it was an extremely critical moment for Yi Xian. Just like that, around 3 days later, Yi Xian's sword intent had fused completely with the 7th level of space. Now he'd started to try to utilize his sword intent to fuse with it, but he noticed that it was very difficult. Fortunately, he still had the sword domain. A wisp of a smile arose on his face when he utilized the sword domain, because he noticed that he could utilize the sword domain to fuse with the 7th level of space. In the following period of time, Yi Xian started to slowly control the 7th level of space under Xue Tong's guidance. In the blink of an eye, a few months passed. On this day, Yi Xian stood in the starry sky while holding a sword in his hand. It wasn't the green profound sword. It was an extremely ordinary green profound sword. After a long moment of silence, Yi Xian suddenly slashed down. Hiss! The space in front of Yi Xian was suddenly torn apart, along with the seventh layer of space-time. Meanwhile, Yi Xian suddenly took a step forward. No, as soon as he took a step forward, the sword domain appeared. In the next moment, the seventh layer of space was instantly torn into pieces by countless rays of light. Core sword domain. At this moment, Yi Xian opened his palm, and the sword in his hand suddenly vanished. The space 3 kilometers away was suddenly torn apart by a strand of sword light. Space folding. The space folding of the seventh layer. Seeing this scene, the corners of Yi Xian's mouth lifted slightly. Now he had finally folded the seventh layer of space-time. Meanwhile, Xuetong suddenly said, "Spatial folding?" Yi Xian looked at Xuetong and nodded. Yes. Xuetong nodded, but didn't say anything. Yi Xian smiled and said, "Do you have any suggestions?" Xuetong said, "You've only folded space-time. Do you know that space-time can be folded again after being folded?" Hearing this, Yi Xian was stunned. Time and space are folded again and again. Xuetong nodded. Yi Xian said in a low voice, "Is that possible?" Xuetong glanced at Yi Xian. "What do you think?" Yi Xian fell silent. Time and space are folded again and again. Xuetong said, "Do you know why that guard sword was so fast?" Yi Xian said, "Time and space are folded?" Xuetong nodded. He's folded the 8th layer at least 4 times. And that's why his sword was able to instantly kill a seamless Dao expert. Because after time and space are folded 4 times, his speed isn't something that the seamless Dao can resist. Yi Xian said in a low voice, "How many times can time and space be folded?" Xuetong looked at Yi Xian. Theoretically speaking, countless times. However, the difficulty increases by a few dozen times with every fold. Moreover, the further it goes, the more difficult it becomes. When she spoke up to this point, she licked her candied fruit and said, "The space-time Dao. This chapter isn't finished. Please continue." "It's not as simple as you think." Yi Xian nodded. "I've learned something new." Xuetong said, "If you can fold time and space a second time, then with your current strength, killing a stage 20 expert is a piece of cake. Even a seamless realm expert isn't impossible." Yi Xian asked, "What if I can fold time and space 3 times?" Xuetong said indifferently, "I can easily kill a seamless Dao expert." Yi Xian asked again, "What if I can fold time and space 4 times?" Xuetong looked at Yi Xian. "I can easily kill a seamless Dao expert. Just like that guard in the Divine Spirit Palace." Yi Xian nodded. "I understand." Xuetong continued, "Folding time and space can't completely measure a person's strength. Besides folding time and space, there's also space-time distortion, space-time pressure, space-time overlap, space-time detonation, space-time black hole, space-time jump, etc. In short, the space-time Dao is boundlessly profound and mysterious." Yi Xian looked at Xuetong. "What are you good at?" Xuetong said indifferently, "A bit of everything." Yi Xian asked, "Are you good at it?" Xuetong said, "I'm good at it." Yi Xian was speechless. Xuetong said, "Take it slow." Yi Xian nodded slightly. "Take it slow." As he said this, he sighed. Ever since Xiao Ta's ability was sealed by his father, his cultivation speed had slowed to a crawl. But there was nothing he could do. For now, besides Qing, and Big Brother, there was probably no one who could undo his father's seal. Xuetong suddenly asked, "Where are you going?" Yi Xian smiled. "I'm going to Divine Sect to deliver something." Xuetong looked at Yi Xian, but didn't say anything. Yi Xian said, "Let's go." He was now at stage 16. If he continued to rush, it wouldn't be hard to reach stage 20. Not only did he have Divine Sect's inheritance, but he also had Xuetong's guidance. But he didn't want to be that fast. He wanted to slow down. Sword Dao. After his epiphany, his sword intent was improved, and he used it to fuse with the 7th space. To put it simply, he wanted to improve his sword Dao. In fact, Crimson Eye was shocked at the moment. Under normal circumstances, Yi Xian should not have been able to enter the seventh space in time. However, not only could this guy enter the seventh space in time, but he could also communicate with the seventh space in time. Most importantly, this guy's sword skills were terrifying. Those sword skills could be said to have increased Yi Xian's battle strength by several times. What a mysterious guy. After a while the two continued forward. 3 days later, the two arrived in front of a black hole. Yi Xian was about to enter when Xuetong suddenly said, "You want to go in?" Yi Xian nodded. Xuetong was silent. Yi Xian asked, "Dangerous?" Xuetong looked at Yi Xian. "Can't you feel it?" Yi Xian shook his head. Xuetong looked at Yi Xian. "How did you survive until now?" "By luck." Yi Xian was speechless. Xuetong looked at the black hole. The legendary level 8 civilization should be within it. With our current strength, entering it is equivalent to entering a pack of wolves. Understand? Yi Xian was slightly helpless. Then what should we do? I promised someone to help deliver something. Xuetong thought for a moment and said, "Let's just keep a low profile." As soon as she finished speaking, she walked into the black hole. Yi Xian hurriedly followed her in. A few minutes later, Yi Xian and Xuetong appeared in an unknown starfield. Yi Xian glanced at the surroundings and said, "Let's go." As he spoke, he led Xuetong towards the right. 2 hours later, Yi Xian arrived before a mountain range. Meanwhile, Xuetong frowned. "There's the smell of blood." Yi Xian smelled blood as well, and he looked towards the distance. Right at this moment, a palm that was over 100 kilometers long suddenly descended from the sky above the mountain range. If this chapter isn't finished, please keep going. In an instant, the entire mountain range shook. Yi Xian's expression instantly changed. Suddenly, an enormous golden barrier of light arose from the mountain range. Bang! The palm instantly shattered upon colliding with the barrier of light, and then it transformed into nothingness. A powerful wave of energy swept towards the surroundings, and in an instant, space was obliterated. Yi Xian's face sank when he witnessed this scene. What happened? Xuetong gazed at Yi Xian. It doesn't seem simple. Yi Xian fell silent for a moment, and then he said, "Let's come back another day." Xuetong nodded. Good idea. As soon as he finished speaking, they intended to flee. Right at this moment, an old man suddenly appeared in front of Yi Xian and Xuetong. Yi Xian's expression changed slightly. Meanwhile, the old man suddenly gazed at the ring on Yi Xian's finger, and his expression instantly changed drastically. A divine ring. Yi Xian blinked. "You're from the divine sect?" The old man hurriedly bowed respectfully. "The divine sect's Li Muki greets the sect master." "Sect master?" Yi Xian was stunned, and then he hurriedly said, "You've misunderstood. I'm just here to deliver the ring. I'm not your sect master." As he spoke, he was about to take off the ring. However, he noticed to his astonishment that he couldn't take it off at all. What's going on? Yi Xian was quite stunned. Li Muki hurriedly bowed respectfully again. "Sect master, please return to the sect with me." Yi Xian spoke in a low voice. "I'm really not your sect master. I was just entrusted by your sect master to deliver the ring back to you. You absolutely must not misunderstand." Li Muki gazed at Yi Xian. "You're wearing the sect master's ring. You're the sect master." Yi Xian was speechless. He still wanted to say something, but at this moment, a terrifying pressure suddenly enveloped him. Yi Xian frowned slightly. He raised his head to look at the sky, only to see the sky suddenly split open. Then a shadow floated out, and that shadow looked down at him. Meanwhile, Li Muki's expression changed drastically. "Sect master, quickly return to the sect with me." Yi Xian still wanted to say something, but Xuetong spoke abruptly. "Listen to him and enter the protective barrier." As soon as she finished speaking, she charged towards the protective barrier. Li Muki hurriedly brought Yi Xian along and vanished on the spot. As soon as they vanished, the area where Yi Xian stood earlier was instantly wiped out by a mysterious force. When he noticed this scene, Yi Xian's expression instantly became extremely unsightly. Soon the three of them appeared on top of a mountain peak. Li Muki glanced at the sky, then looked at Yi Xian. "Sect master, the 10 ultimate shrine besieged divine sect this time for our divine sect's divine ring." Yi Xian said in a deep voice. I'm not your sect master. As he spoke, he was about to take off the ring, but he couldn't take it off at all. At that moment Li Muki said, "The divine ring has recognized you as its master." As he spoke he slowly knelt down. "Please protect my divine sect master." Yi Xian was speechless. Damn it! Was that woman from the Divine Spirit Palace crazy? Asking me to be divine sect master. Does she want me to save divine sect? But how am I supposed to save them? At that moment, Xiaota suddenly said, "Young master, you're too stupid. That woman doesn't want you to save divine sect. She definitely wants Sister Tianming to save divine sect. Your divine sect master. What does that mean?" "It means that divine sect has Sister Tianming behind them. As for you, if it wasn't for Sister Tianming, she probably wouldn't even have let you through the door. You need to know what's going on," Yi Xian said indifferently. "The next time I see Qing I'll say that you're bad-mouthing her." Xiaota was instantly enraged. "Don't slander me. Sister Tianming is my faith." Yi Xian said, "Do you think Qing believes you or me?" After a moment of silence, Xiaota said, "Young master, I apologize for my words just now. I'm sorry. I, Xiaota, will be more careful with my words in the future. Please be magnanimous and let me go." Yi Xian was speechless. End of this chapter. Chapter 1900. Yi Xian was about to speak again, when a group of divine sect powerhouses showed up at this moment. Yi Xian was shocked when he saw them. Wow, there were actually 9 seamless path powerhouses, and 2 of them were divine spirit realm powerhouses. This lineup was a little fierce. Li Muki hurriedly signaled to the divine sect experts. Everyone understood and saluted respectfully. "Greetings, sect master." "Sect master." Yi Xian was speechless. Just as he was about to refuse, Shuetong suddenly transmitted his voice. "Don't refuse." Yi Xian looked at Shuetong and asked, "Why?" Shuetong said indifferently, "Think about it yourself." Yi Xian pondered for a moment and sighed inwardly. Divine sect was currently besieged by powerful enemies. Since he had the divine sect divine ring, the forces outside would naturally think that he was divine sect master. No matter how he explained, the forces outside wouldn't let him go. Moreover, the enemy's target was divine sect's divine ring, and it was in his hands. Most importantly, he couldn't take it off. Cut off his fingers? He had thought about it, but he found that the divine ring had fused with him. Even if he cut off his fingers, it would be useless unless he used the profound cyan sword to destroy it. Thinking of this, Yi Xian sighed softly. When he asked the divine spirit palace woman if she would trick him, she said yes. Obviously, she was referring to this. He didn't complain, because he also benefited. Wanting to benefit but not doing anything. How could there be such a good thing in the world? Moreover, he needed divine sect. Thinking of this, Yi Xian looked at Li Muki in front of him. "Are you really willing to recognize me as sect master?" Li Muki hurriedly said, "Of course." The rest of the divine sect experts also hurriedly said, "We are willing." Yi Xian smiled. "I am only at the 16th phase. 16th phase. Hearing this, the expressions of the divine sect experts in front of Yi Xian became a little strange. Indeed a little weak. At this time Li Muki said, "Our divine sect is willing to recognize you as sect master." Yi Xian looked at Li Muki. "Why?" Li Muki replied in a solemn voice. "Because you were personally chosen by sect master Shuesheng." The expressions of the experts from the divine sect changed when they heard Li Muki. Water sect master. In other words, he was the previous sect master of divine sect. Yi Xian said, "Because I was chosen by her, so you acknowledge me?" Li Muki nodded. Yi Xian was puzzled. "Why?" "Because in my opinion, she has already perished, and all of you can elect a new sect master." Li Muki said solemnly, "Only with the divine ring can one become the sect master, because my divine sect's treasure, the divine seal, is within the divine ring." Yi Xian hurriedly said, "I can return the divine ring to divine sect." Li Muki shook his head. "The fact that sect master Shuesheng gave the divine ring to you means that she feels that you can lead my divine sect out of this predicament." As he spoke, he and the divine sect experts respectfully bowed. "We are willing to pledge our lives to sect master." Yi Xian was slightly speechless. This is like forcing a duck onto a perch. At that moment, an old man at the side suddenly said, "Back then, Sect Master Shuixing and the Temple Master of 10 Ultimate Shrine fought. In the end, we don't know where the two of them went, but we know that they have perished. All these years, my Divine Sect and 10 Ultimate Shrine have always been taking revenge on each other. In the beginning, neither of us could do anything to the other, but for some reason, Divine King Valley suddenly helped 10 Ultimate Shrine. Since then, my Divine Sect could only defend passively." Shuatong suddenly said, "So Divine King Valley is the key, right?" The old man shook his head. "Now, even without Divine King Valley, my Divine Sect's overall strength is inferior to 10 Ultimate Shrine." Shuatong looked. "This chapter is not over. Please continue to the next page." He glanced at the screen of light above him. "How much longer can this formation last?" The old man said, "A month. A month." Shuatong nodded slightly and looked at Yi Xian. "You only have a month." Yi Xian thought for a moment and said, "Tell me about the strength of my Divine Sect and 10 Ultimate Shrine." The old man said, "My Divine Sect still has 2 Divine Spirit Realm Experts, 12 Seamless Realm Experts, 53 Seamless Realm Experts, and 390 Level 20 Experts. As for the 10 Ultimate Shrine, they still have 5 Divine Spirit Experts, 37 Seamless Dao Experts, more than 70 Seamless Realm Experts, and more than 500 Phase 20 Experts." Yi Xian's face sank when he heard that. The difference in strength is so huge. It's a terrible mess. Meanwhile, Shuatong suddenly said, "Their main objective is the Divine Ring?" The old man nodded. "Because there is a divine artifact and a technique within the Divine Ring. The divine artifact is called the Divine Ruler, and it has the ability to measure time and space. Besides that, there is also a supreme technique, the Divine Radiating Scripture." Yi Xian frowned slightly. "The Divine Radiating Scripture?" The old man nodded slightly. "Only by cultivating this technique can one attain the Fate Chart realm." Yi Xian gazed at the divine ring in his hand. With a command in his heart, a thick golden ancient book suddenly appeared in front of Yi Xian. The Divine Radiating Scripture. All the experts of the Divine Sect became excited when they saw the Divine Radiating Scripture. Yi Xian glanced at the Divine Radiating Scripture in his hand, and then he opened it. As soon as he did, a ray of golden light shot into the center of his brows. Bang! Yi Xian's body trembled violently as a huge amount of information surged into his mind. A short moment later, Yi Xian opened his eyes, and Shuatong asked, "How is it?" Yi Xian gazed at Shuatong. "What do you mean?" Shuatong said, "How is the technique?" Yi Xian thought for a moment and said, "It seems to be just that." The expressions of all the experts of the Divine Sect instantly became strange. "Just that. Is that something a human would say?" Shuatong said, "Can I have a look?" Yi Xian passed the Divine Radiating Scripture to Shuatong. The expressions of all the experts of the Divine Sect changed drastically when they witnessed this scene. And Li Muki hurriedly said, "Sect Master, you mustn't. The Divine Radiating Scripture is the supreme technique of our Divine Sect. Besides the Sect Master, no one else is allowed to see it." Yi Xian suddenly said, "All of you can see it as well." All the experts of the Divine Sect were stunned when they heard this. Yi Xian gazed at Li Muki. "All of you can see it as well." Li Muki gulped. And then he said, Isn't that a bit inappropriate?" Yi Xian smiled. "There's nothing inappropriate about it. All of you can see it. Of course, I won't force you if you're unwilling." Li Muki hurriedly said, "I'm willing. I'm willing." The other experts of the Divine Sect hurriedly said as well, "We're willing. We're willing." Shuatong suddenly said, "Hurry up and thank the Sect Master." All the experts of the Divine Sect hurriedly bowed respectfully. "Thank you, Sect Master." Yi Xian smiled, and then he passed the Divine Radiating Scripture to Shuatong. "Give it to them after you've seen it." Shuatong nodded and took the scripture. Yi Xian suddenly gazed at Li Muki and asked, "Can the Divine Sect summon an ancestor?" Li Muki nodded. "Yes. However, it can only be done once." Yi Xian smiled. "I can finally summon an ancestor." Li Muki was speechless. A short while later, all the experts of the Divine Sect had read the scripture, and it caused them to be extremely excited. After all, only the sect master could read such a supreme technique. Yet now, Yi Xian had actually allowed them to read it for free. This chapter isn't over. Please continue to the next page. What's going on? On the other side, Yi Xian took out the divine ruler. At this moment he was studying it. After studying it for a while, he shook his head. This divine ruler was indeed not bad. It could measure time and space, and it could even manipulate time and space. However, compared to the Qingxian sword, the gap was really huge. Right at this moment, a powerful pressure suddenly pressed down from the sky. Everyone looked up and saw a man appear outside the screen of light. Li Muqi, who was beside Yi Xian, said in a low voice, "He's the current temple master of 10 Ultimate Shrine Muqiu." Muqiu looked down at Yi Xian from the sky. "You're the current sect master of Divine Sect?" Yi Xian nodded. Muqiu smiled. "How interesting. They actually let a rank 16 ant be the sect master. Is there really no one else in the Divine Sect?" The expressions of the experts of the Divine Sect became slightly unsightly when they heard that. Yi Xian smiled and said, "Ancestor summon." Ancestor summon? The experts of the Divine Sect were slightly stunned. Yi Xian looked at Li Muqi. "Ancestor summon." Li Muqi hesitated for a moment and said, "Sect master, that's ancestor summon?" Yi Xian nodded. "Do you have a problem with that?" Li Muqi smiled bitterly. "Sect master, that's our final trump card." Yi Xian smiled. "Looks like all of you don't take me to be the sect master at all. Since that's the case, then I'll return the position of sect master to all of you." As soon as he finished speaking, he left with Xue Tong. The expressions of Li Muqi and the others instantly changed drastically when they witnessed this scene. And one of the old men hurriedly said, "Ancestor summon." Quickly. Li Muqi hurriedly nodded. "Ancestor summon." As soon as he finished speaking, bang! A powerful aura suddenly shot into the sky from below the Divine Sect. Muqiu's expression instantly changed when he witnessed this scene. Is there something wrong with this new sect master? He summons ancestor summon at the slightest disagreement? Actually, it wasn't just Muqiu. Even the experts of the Divine Sect found it hard to understand. Ancestor summon was the final trump card of the Divine Sect, and it had been used just like that. In the future, no other power would fear the Divine Sect. In the sky above the Divine Sect, an old man appeared before everyone. The Divine Sect's ancestor. The experts of the Divine Sect all knelt down. "Greetings, ancestor." The Divine Sect's ancestor swept the surroundings with his gaze. In the next moment, his gaze descended onto Yi Xian. When he saw the spatial ring on Yi Xian's finger, he frowned. "You're the current Divine Sect's sect master?" Yi Xian nodded. "That's right." The old man frowned slightly. "Why are you so weak?" Yi Xian smiled. "You haven't matured yet. Everyone." At this moment, a trace of surprise flashed through the old man's eyes. "You." A moment later he grinned. "Natural fate interesting. Little fellow, you're very interesting." Yi Xian bowed slightly, then pointed at Muqiu. "Senior, can you kill him?" The old man turned to look at Muqiu, and Muqiu's expression instantly changed. This old man was a true Fate Realm expert. He didn't even think before turning to run. Muqiu raised his hand slightly, then pressed down lightly. Boom! The distant horizon suddenly exploded. Following a miserable scream, countless amounts of blood splattered. Muqiu's body was directly destroyed, but his soul had already escaped. The old man didn't chase after him. Instead, he appeared in front of Yi Xian and looked at Yi Xian. "What's your name?" Yi Xian said, "Little fellow Yi Xian." The old man pulled Yi Xian to the side and whispered, "How many big shots are behind you?" Yi Xian. End of this chapter. Chapter 1901. A few big shots. Yi Xian's expression was a little strange. Wasn't that a little too straightforward? The Divine Sect ancestor smiled. "Little friend, you were born with a 9-phase fate. If you didn't have a big shot behind you, you wouldn't have lived until now." Yi Xian smiled. "Senior's eyes are like torches." The Divine Sect ancestor looked at Yi Xian. "May I know what realm the big shot behind you is at?" Yi Xian thought for a moment, then said, "I really don't know." The Divine Sect ancestor was silent. Yi Xian said again, Senior, it was a coincidence that I could become the divine sect master. I hope that Senior can choose a new sect master. The old man quickly said. You are my divine sect master. Yi Xian, the old man said again. Little guy, I can still stay for a few days. Let me guide you for a few days. I hope it will be of help to you. Yi Xian said solemnly. Thank you very much. In the following time, Yi Xian began to cultivate with the old man. Under the old man's guidance, his cultivation and spatial attainments could be said to have improved by leaps and bounds. 10 Ultimate Shrine. On this day, a woman came to 10 Ultimate Shrine. The woman wore a purple dress and had shoulder-length hair. She held a sheathed longsword in her hand. The sheath was completely black and flickered with light. At this moment, 10 Ultimate Shrine Master Muchio appeared in the shrine. At this moment his body had recovered, but his face was still extremely pale. Muchio glanced at the woman and then cupped his fists. Miss Mao Shi. Mao Shi. This was the most monstrous genius of Divine King Valley's current generation, born with a three-phase fate. Mao Shi nodded slightly. Master Muchio, I heard that Divine Sect has a new sect master. Muchio nodded. Yes. However, that person is only at phase 16, nothing to worry about. Mao Shi looked at Muchio. Master Muchio, do you think that Divine Sect will let a person at phase 16 be the sect master? Muchio frowned. He had forgotten to think about this. Mao Shi continued. According to what I know, this person has a god ring, which means that he has obtained the approval of the previous sect master of the Divine Sect, Shui Sheng. Shui Sheng is a peak fate matrix expert, so how could someone who has obtained her approval be ordinary? Muchio said solemnly. But that young man is really only at rank 16. Mao Shi shook his head. Most of the time, realms don't mean anything. Muchio asked. Then what does Miss Mao Shi think? Mao Shi said. First, get someone to investigate this person and find out his background. The second point is that the Divine Sect has already summoned its ancestors. They have now lost their final trump card. My master's meaning is that the Divine Sect should disappear. However, we need to investigate the new sect master's background first. Muchio nodded. I've already sent someone to investigate. Mao Shi nodded slightly. Temple Master Muchio. Master has instructed us that after we destroy the Divine Sect, we only want the Divine Ring. Everything else will belong to the 10 Ultimate Shrine. Muchio replied, Of course. Mao Shi nodded and turned to leave. In the hall, Muchio was silent for a long time before he sighed softly. In the past, the 10 Ultimate Shrine was even stronger than the Divine King Valley. However, following the fall of the previous Temple Master, the 10 Ultimate Shrine no longer had a life matrix powerhouse. Now the 10 Ultimate Shrine was the same as the Divine Sect. They had to obey the Divine King Valley. This was because the Divine King Valley had a life matrix powerhouse. After a while, Muchio looked outside the hall and frowned slightly. Divine Ring. Why only one Divine Ring? Divine Sect. At that moment, Yi Xian was sitting cross-legged on the ground, attempting to reach rank 17. In front of Yi Xian was the Divine Sect ancestor. The Divine Sect ancestor sized up Yi Xian, his expression becoming more and more solemn. After interacting with Yi Xian, he realized that not only did Yi Xian have an innate life matrix, but his bloodline was also extremely powerful. He had never seen such a powerful bloodline before. He was extremely curious about Yi Xian's background. Just then, where did this second generation come from? At that moment, the Divine Sect ancestor suddenly turned around and walked to the entrance of the hall. He looked into the distance and saw a powerful aura surging out from a nearby hall. That was the hall where Shuetong was. The Divine Sect ancestor said in a deep voice, Divine Spirit. This girl actually reached the Divine Spirit realm in less than a day. Amazing! At that moment, the hall's door suddenly opened and Shuetong walked out. Shuetong greedily took a deep breath, then slowly walked to the Divine Sect ancestor. Above the Divine Spirit is Life Matrix, right? The old man nodded. Shuetong asked, What is Life Matrix? The old man said in a deep voice, Life Matrix is equivalent to one's own fate. How many living beings can control their own fate? Countless living beings can't escape birth, old age, sickness and death, or natural disasters. After reaching the life matrix realm, one can slowly control their own fate. Of course, whether they can truly control their own fate is unknown. Xue Tong looked into the hall. What will happen if he reaches the life matrix realm? The old man smiled. Right now, he has a natural life matrix, and he has reached phase 9. If he reaches the life matrix realm, his cultivation speed will be at least 10 times that of a normal person. Simply put, once he reaches the life matrix realm, he will be invincible among his peers. This is because normal people need to cultivate, but if he doesn't, he will directly reach phase 9. Xue Tong frowned. That's not fair. The old man nodded. It is indeed not fair, but there is no such thing as absolute fairness in this world. Look at this girl's bloodline. The old man has seen the world, but this kind of bloodline is something the old man has never seen before. This girl's father is definitely not a normal person. At this point he sighed and said, Look, he was born with a good father. Aren't you angry? Xue Tong took out a candied fruit and licked it, then said, I'm not angry. The old man was puzzled. Why? Xue Tong said, I told him. His father is my father. The old man's face froze. Xue Tong glanced at the old man, and then he said, Old man, don't panic when you don't have a formidable father. Hurry up and find one. The old man was speechless. Xue Tong continued, Even though I don't have a life matrix at the 9th level, he does. So if I follow him, it'll be equivalent to me having a life matrix at the 9th level as well. When she spoke up to this point, she licked the candied fruit and said, If I can't beat him, then I'll join him. Look, under normal circumstances, I might not be able to attain the divine spirit realm, but I've attained it in less than a month by following him. Sometimes it's useless to bury your head in hard work. The old man couldn't help but give her a thumbs up. Little girl, this old man has learned something new. Xue Tong gazed at Yi Xian, who was cultivating in the hall. As long as I have a powerful backer, the world is mine. The old man was speechless. At this moment Yi Xian, who was in the hall, suddenly stood up. As soon as he stood up, a powerful aura swept out from his body. Phase 17. Yi Xian took a deep breath. He'd attained phase 17 now. At this moment, the divine sex ancestor appeared in front of Yi Xian. He sized up Yi Xian, and then he said, How do you feel? Yi Xian opened his right hand, and a sword appeared in his hand. In the next moment, he directly entered the 7th layer of space-time. Gradually, he completely merged with the 7th layer of space-time. At the same time, a powerful pressure appeared in the surroundings. Space-time pressure. A moment later, the corners of Yi Xian's mouth curled up slightly. He left the 7th layer of space-time and looked at the divine sex ancestor. Senior, I want to fight an expert of the seamless Tao. The old man hesitated for a moment, and then he said, I'm afraid it'll be a bit difficult. Yi Xian smiled. I'll give it a try. As he spoke, he looked at Xue Tong, and Xue Tong said indifferently, I'm already at the divine spirit realm. Yi Xian was stunned, and then he said, So fast. Xue Tong nodded. Yes. Yi Xian's expression was slightly strange. Isn't this little girl a bit too terrifying? She reached the divine spirit realm in less than a day. Meanwhile, the old man smiled. This little girl's foundation is too solid. She was already at the peak of the seamless Tao, and she was only a step away from the divine spirit realm. But after she saw the godly radiating scripture, she understood how to step into the divine spirit realm. Of course, if she didn't have the godly radiating scripture, it would probably take some time for her to reach the divine spirit realm. Yi Xian nodded lightly, and then he looked at Xue Tong. Congratulations. Xue Tong nodded. Thank you. Yi Xian smiled, and then he called over a seamless path powerhouse from the divine sect. This powerhouse was called Mu Yan, and he was a powerhouse at the peak of the seamless path. In space, Yi Xian stood with his sword in hand, and Mu Yan stood in front of him. Xue Tong and the divine sex ancestor watched from the side. Yi Xian smiled. Let's begin. As soon as he finished speaking, the sword in his hand suddenly vanished. A flying sword. This sword directly folded space and time. In the distance, Mu Yan's expression instantly changed. He hadn't expected that Yi Xian's sword would be so swift, and he immediately clenched his right hand tightly. In an instant, the space and time he resided in had transformed into a spatial wall. Bang! Yi Xian's flying sword had been blocked. Meanwhile, Yi Xian suddenly appeared in front of Mu Yan, and then an expanse of sword light enveloped the space and time Mu Yan resided in. Rumble! The spatial wall exploded into pieces, and Mu Yan was blasted over 30 kilometers away. As soon as he stopped moving, a flying sword had already arrived at the center of his forehead. He lost. The divine sect's ancestor's face sank when he witnessed this scene. I underestimated his sword technique. In the distance, Yi Xian sheathed his sword and smiled. If he held the green profound sword right now, then he would even be able to kill a divine spirit realm expert. The boost from the green profound sword was too terrifying. As if he'd thought of something, Yi Xian gazed at Xuetong. Miss Xuetong, can I fully activate the energy of my bloodline? Xuetong thought for a moment and said, yes, but it's slightly dangerous, because your bloodline is extremely abnormal, and you might not be able to control it. Yi Xian fell silent. Just as Xuetong had said, he knew his own bloodline very well. Once it was activated, then his mind would be corroded by killing intent. He was quite worried. Actually, he slightly understood his father's actions. If his father didn't suppress his bloodline, then once he activated it, then it would be equivalent to playing with fire and getting burned. His bloodline was too unstable. Meanwhile, Xuetong spoke abruptly. It's fine. You can lend your blood to me in the future, and I'll activate it. I'll be very happy to serve you. Yi Xian was speechless. Chapter 1902. Yi Xian was speechless. Xuetong could really borrow the power of his bloodline. In the end, he gave up on the power of his bloodline. That was because he didn't dare to activate the power of his bloodline, especially now that there were no restrictions on it. If he activated it himself, he definitely wouldn't be able to resist the erosion of the power of his bloodline. However, he was also very curious about what it would be like if the power of his bloodline was completely activated. At that moment, the divine sect master said, I still have 2 days. What do you want me to do for you? 2 days. Yi Xian was silent. He had to make good use of the divine sect ancestor's soul, or it would be a waste. Xuetong suddenly said, you can go to the 10 ultimate shrine and self-destruct. Yi Xian was speechless. The old man glanced at Xuetong and shook his head with a smile. It's useless. This strand of my soul is about to completely dissipate. Even if I self-destruct, it won't produce much power and won't hurt the 10 ultimate shrines foundation. Moreover, the Divine King Valley is a greater threat. Yi Xian shook his head and sighed. What a mess. The old man looked at Yi Xian and bowed slightly. Young man, please protect my divine sect. Yi Xian said in a deep voice, Senior, there's no need for that. I've received benefits from divine sect, so I should help divine sect. I'll do my best. The old man smiled faintly. I'm relieved to hear this little friend's words. He hesitated for a moment before asking, Young man, is the person behind you from the mountain? Yi Xian frowned slightly. From the mountain? The old man was confused. Isn't he? Yi Xian asked. What's from the mountain? The old man said after a moment of silence. Dao Mountain. Yi Xian was confused. Dao Mountain? Where is it? The old man said in a deep voice. A very sacred place. Only those who have reached the 9th stage of life matrix realm can set foot on this mountain. Once they set foot on this mountain, they are known as the people from the mountain. When he spoke up to this point, he paused for a moment and said, I thought that the person behind you was someone from the mountain, but now it seems like that's not the case. Yi Xian was about to speak when Li Muki suddenly appeared here, and he spoke solemnly. Ancestor Sect Master, I just received news that something big has happened in God King Valley and the 10 Ultimate Divine Hall. A huge commotion. The old man looked at Yi Xian. Yi Xian said, Are they going to launch a large-scale attack? Li Muki nodded. It should be. Yi Xian said, With our current strength we definitely can't stop them, right? Li Muki nodded. We can't. Not to mention all of them together. Just the God King Valley alone is enough to destroy us. Yi Xian thought for a moment, then turned to look at Shuetong. Do you have any good ideas? Shuetong glanced at Yi Xian. Tell me your thoughts first. Yi Xian smiled and said, My idea is to scare them. Shuetong licked his candied fruit. All right. Li Muqi was quite puzzled. Scare them? They aren't easily frightened. Yi Xian said, Let's give it a try. As he spoke, he gazed at Shuetong. Cooperate with me. Shuetong nodded. All right. Yi Xian said. Then let's head to God King Valley right now. Li Muqi was stunned. Go to the God King Valley? Yi Xian nodded. Of our own accord. Li Muqi hesitated for a moment and said, Sect Master you. Yi Xian smiled. They'll still return if I don't go. Since that's the case, then why don't I go on my own accord? As he spoke, he gazed at the Divine Sect's ancestor. Senior, you guard this place. The Divine Sect's ancestor spoke in a low voice. Little fellow, are you confident? Yi Xian smiled. I'm not. However, I can give it a try. The Divine Sect's ancestor hesitated for a moment before he said, Be careful. Yi Xian nodded. I will. Green City, Yi Clan Ancestral Hall. Ancestor, Yi Xian lacks talent and virtue. From this moment onward, Yi Xian's position as prince shall be removed, and Yi Lang shall succeed him. It was an old man in black robes who spoke. A young man stood not too far away from the old man, and he had a faint smile on the corners of his mouth. It was Yi Lang. The Yi clan's elders stood at his sides. Why? Right at this moment, a slightly timid voice suddenly resounded within the ancestral hall. Everyone looked towards the source of the voice and saw a young girl standing at the entrance. She was around 12 or 13 years old, and her hands were tightly gripping the corners of her dress. Her face was sickly pale, and she seemed slightly weak. Moreover, there was a trace of timidity in her eyes. The young girl was called Yi Ling, and she was Yi Xian's younger sister. When she heard that the clan intended to remove Yi Xian from his position, she disregarded her illness and rushed over. The black-robed old man frowned. Yi Ling, what are you doing? The young girl called Yi Ling bowed to the people in the ancestral hall and said timidly, Great Elder, my brother Yi Xian is a prince. Why did you remove his title for no reason? The Great Elder looked coldly at Yi Ling. This is a clan matter. What are you interrupting for? Leave. Yi Ling was obviously afraid and did not dare to look directly at the Great Elder. However, she did not leave and mustered her courage to enter the ancestral hall. She once again bowed to the elders on both sides. Dear elders, my brother is fighting with the Li clan over the mining rights at Nanshan. He's fighting for the clan, and we don't even know if he's dead or alive. Yet, the clan is using a groundless excuse to remove his title. This is really unfair. Impudent. The Great Elder suddenly raged. Whether or not he is removed, it's not up to a little girl like you to decide. Men, drag her away. At this moment, the newly appointed Prince Yi Lang suddenly laughed. You should be flogged 30 times as a warning to others. The Great Elder said coldly, then flogged 30 times. Soon 2 guards of the Yi clan rushed in. Yi Ling clenched her fists and said angrily, This is unfair. My brother has risked his life for the clan for so many years, and even now, he's fighting for the clan. The clan is so unfair to him. One of the guards glanced at the newly appointed Prince Yi Lang, and he knew that this was his chance to show off. The guard sneered. Young Master Yi Lang inherits the title of prince, and it's everyone's wish. What are you shouting for? As he spoke, he raised his hand and slapped Yi Ling's face. Slap! A crisp slap sounded, and the right side of Yi Ling's face instantly turned red and swollen. However, she did not cry, and only held her cheek tightly. Yi Lang looked at the guard, and said with a smile, What's your name? The guard hurriedly bowed. Subordinate Zhang Mu greets the Crown Prince. Yi Lang nodded. You're very good. After I become the Crown Prince, I'll need 10 guards. From now on, you'll be my guard. Hearing this, Zhang Mu was overjoyed and hurriedly bowed deeply. I'll go through fire and water for the Crown Prince, and I'll do anything for you. Yi Lang nodded slightly. Drag him out. This person is disturbing the ancestral hall. Don't show any mercy, understand? Zhang Mu glanced at Yi Lang, and when he saw the murderous intent in Yi Lang's eyes, he understood. Immediately, he grabbed Yi Ling's hair and dragged her out. At this moment, Zhang Mu seemed to have seen something, and he suddenly stopped. In the ancestral hall, everyone turned their heads to look outside. Not far from the ancestral hall, a young man was walking towards the ancestral hall. The young man was wearing a tight-fitting robe, and the robe was tattered, and there was blood everywhere. This person was Yi Xian, who had rushed back from the South Mountain. Seeing Yi Xian, Yi Lang's mouth curled into a cold smile. Inside the ancestral hall, the elders frowned. The great elder narrowed his eyes, and his expression was frighteningly dark. No one knew what he was thinking. From afar, when Yi Xian saw Zhang Mu dragging Yi Ling, his face turned savage. "Who gave you the guts to touch my sister?" When Zhang Mu saw Yi Xian, his face changed. He hurriedly looked at Yi Lang, and was about to speak, when Yi Xian suddenly appeared in front of him like a ferocious tiger. Before the latter could react, Yi Xian's fist landed on his face. Pung! Zhang Mu felt a wave of dizziness, and he stumbled and fell. However, Yi Ling did not stop there. He charged towards Zhang Mu again. At this time, Yi Lang suddenly roared, "Yi Xian, he's my man, how dare you!" Yi Xian suddenly stepped on Zhang Mu's chest. Pooh! Zhang Mu spat out a mouthful of blood. Seeing this, Yi Lang's face turned ugly. Yi Xian looked up at him, and snarled, "Your man?" As he spoke, he stepped on Zhang Mu's face. Zhang Mu's face turned into a bloody mess as he screamed, "Prince, save me!" Yi Xian did not care about Zhang Mu, as he walked to Yi Ling's side. Seeing Yi Ling's appearance, Yi Xian felt as though his heart was being sliced by a knife. He clenched his fists and his entire body trembled. When Yi Ling saw Yi Xian, her tears flowed out. "Brother, it hurts, it hurts!" Hearing this, Yi Xian's expression turned savage. In the next instant, he charged in front of Zhang Mu, and kicked Zhang Mu's head. Pung! Qingqing Yi Clan Ancestral Hall. Ancestors, Yi Xian has no talent, no virtue. From now on, Yi Xian's position as prince shall be replaced by Yi Lang. The one who spoke was an old man in black robes. Not far behind the old man, there was a youth with a faint smile on his face. This person was Yi Lang. On both sides were the Yi clan's elders. "Why?" At this time, a timid voice rang out in the ancestral hall. Everyone turned to look, and saw a little girl standing at the door. She was about 12 or 13 years old, and her hands were tightly gripping the hem of her skirt. Her face had a sickly pallor, and she looked a little weak. There was even a trace of fear in her eyes. This girl was called Yi Ling, and she was Yi Xian's younger sister. When she heard that the clan wanted to remove Yi Xian, she disregarded her illness and rushed over. The black-robed old man frowned. "Yi Ling, what are you doing?" The little girl called Yi Ling bowed to the people in the ancestral hall, and said timidly, "Great elder, my brother Yi Xian is a prince. Why did you discard him for no reason?" The great elder looked at Yi Ling coldly. "This is a matter of the clan. Why are you interrupting? Leave." Yi Ling was clearly a little fearful. She did not dare to look the great elder in the eye, but she did not leave. Instead, she mustered up her courage and walked into the ancestral hall. She bowed to the elders on both sides of the hall and said, "Elders, my brother is currently fighting with the Li family for the mining rights of the mine in Nanshan. He is now fighting for the family, and it is unknown whether he is alive or dead. However, the family has used a groundless excuse to remove his position as the crown prince." Impudent! The great elder suddenly raged. "Discard him or not, it's not up to a little girl like you to decide. Men, drag her away." At this time, the new prince Yi Lang suddenly laughed. "You should be flogged 30 times as a warning to others." The great elder replied coldly, "Then flog her 30 times. Soon, 2 guards of the Yi clan rushed in. Yi Ling clenched her fists and said angrily, "This is unfair. My brother has risked his life for the clan for so many years. Even now, he is risking his life for the clan. The clan is so unfair to him." One of the guards glanced at the new prince Yi Lang. He knew that this was his chance to shine. The guard sneered, "Young Master Yi Lang inherits the position of prince. What are you yelling about?" As he spoke, He raised his hand and slapped Yiling's face. Slap. A crisp slap sounded, and the right side of Yiling's face instantly swelled up. However, she did not cry. She only held her cheek tightly. Yiling looked at the guard and smiled. What's your name? The guard hurriedly bowed. Subordinate Zhang Mu greets the prince. Yiling nodded. You're not bad. After I become the prince, I will need 10 guards. You can be my guard from now on. Hearing this, Zhang Mu was overjoyed. He hurriedly bowed deeply. This subordinate is willing to go through fire and water for the prince. Yiling nodded. Drag him away. This person is disturbing the ancestral hall. Don't hold back. Do you understand? Zhang Mu glanced at Yiling. When he saw the murderous intent in Yiling's eyes, he understood. He immediately grabbed Yiling's hair and dragged her out. At this moment, Zhang Mu suddenly stopped as if he had seen something. In the ancestral hall, everyone turned their heads to look outside. Not far from the ancestral hall, a young man was walking towards the ancestral hall. The young man was wearing a tight-fitting robe. The robe was tattered and covered in blood. The young man was Yi Xian, who had rushed back from Nanshan. Seeing Yi Xian, Yiling's lips curled into a sinister smile. Inside the ancestral hall, the elders frowned. The great elder narrowed his eyes, his face dark and gloomy. No one knew what he was thinking. From afar, when Yi Xian saw Zhang Mu dragging Yiling, his face turned savage. Who gave you the guts to touch my sister? When Zhang Mu saw Yi Xian, his face changed. He hurriedly looked at Yiling and was about to speak. At this time, Yi Xian leaped in front of him like a ferocious tiger. Before the latter could react, Yi Xian's fist landed on his face. Pung! Zhang Mu felt a wave of dizziness, and he stumbled and fell. However, Yiling did not stop there. He charged at Zhang Mu again. At this time, Yiling suddenly roared. Yi Xian, he's my man. How dare you? Yi Xian suddenly stepped on Zhang Mu's chest. Pooh! Zhang Mu spat out a mouthful of blood. Seeing this, Yiling's face turned ugly. Yi Xian looked up at him and said, Your man? As he spoke, he stepped on Zhang Mu's face. Zhang Mu's face turned into a bloody mess, as he screamed, Prince, save me! Yi Xian did not care about Zhang Mu. As he walked up to Yiling, seeing Yiling's state, Yi Xian felt as though his heart was being cut by a knife. He clenched his fists, and his entire body trembled. When Yiling saw Yi Xian, her tears flowed. Brother, it hurts, it hurts. Hearing this, Yi Xian's expression turned savage. In the next instant, he charged in front of Zhang Mu and kicked Zhang Mu's head. Pung! Chapter 1903. Mu Qiu was so angry that his lungs were about to explode. Was that something a human would say? Xue Tong lowered his head slightly as the corners of his mouth curled up. He had so many backers. Nice. At this moment, Yi Xian sighed in a low voice. I also want to live a normal life, but I can't. He glanced at Mu Qiu. I'm in pain. Do you understand? Mu Qiu stared at Yi Xian. His gaze was like a sword, as if he wanted to cut Yi Xian into 1,000 pieces. Yi Xian spread his hands. Come kill me. I won't fight back. Mu Qiu clenched his fists as his entire body trembled. Yi Xian said angrily, What are you looking at? Come and kill me. Come here. Mu Qiu's expression became ferocious. Yi Xian said angrily, I beg you to kill me. Xue Tong was speechless. Mu Qiu's expression suddenly calmed down. He glanced at the Divine King Valley below before looking at Yi Xian. I won't kill you. I'll piss you off. After saying that, he left with the 10 ultimate shrine powerhouses. Yi Xian looked at Xue Tong and sighed. It's really painful to be a second-generation heir. It's really. Xue Tong suddenly punched Yi Xian's face. Bang! Yi Xian flew thousands of feet away. Xue Tong licked her sugar-coated haws and glanced at Yi Xian in the distance. You'll be struck by lightning sooner or later. Yi Xian was speechless. On the other side, Mu Qiu's expression was extremely ugly. A 10 ultimate shrine elder beside Mu Qiu said in a deep voice, Temple Master, Yi Xian is too arrogant. Mu Qiu said coldly, He has the right to be arrogant. The Divine King Valley must be afraid of him if they don't touch him. If the 10 ultimate shrine touches him, I'm afraid we won't be able to die straight away. The elder asked in a deep voice, What should we do now? After a moment of silence, Mu Qiu said, "Let's wait and see. If God King Valley doesn't make a move, then we won't." With that, he turned around and left. Yi Xian and Xue Tong returned to Divine Sect. Yi Xian continued to cultivate, and now, he is trying to enter the 8th space-time. Seamless space-time. As soon as he entered the 8th space-time continuum, he felt an extremely terrifying space-time pressure. Not only that, there was a person who looked exactly like him, standing in front of him. At this moment, Divine Sect's ancestor appeared beside Yi Xian. He looked at Yi Xian. "Do you know what seamless is?" Yi Xian shook his head. God Sect ancestor said solemnly, "The so-called infinity is the infinity of time and space. In this space, time and space are limitless. Not only is it limitless, but it is also a mirror image. The person you see in front of you is actually you." As he spoke, he opened his palm and swept it lightly. In an instant, countless figures of him appeared here. Yi Xian was a little surprised. "This is?" God Sect ancestor said. "Each space-time continuum is a different world. The core of the 8th space-time continuum is the mirror image duplication. You can use space-time to duplicate a mirror image. Of course, it is very difficult to do this. Even some divine spirit realm experts can't do it." Yi Xian was a little confused. "Why is it difficult?" God Sect ancestor said. "Because first, you have to merge with the 8th space-time continuum, and then use the special characteristics of the 8th space-time to duplicate a mirror image. Generally, those who can do this are at least in the life matrix realm. Divine spirit realm experts can at most use space-time pressure and space-time folding functions." At this point he paused and said, "With your current strength, it is still very difficult to merge with the 8th space-time continuum." Yi Xian sighed softly. At this moment, he felt that it was really difficult. If the enemies were of the same level, he really wouldn't be afraid. But the problem was that the enemies were several levels higher than him. One must know that those people on the mountain had their eyes on him. And those people on the mountain were at least in the 9th level of the life matrix realm. The 9th level of the life matrix realm. How to play? He felt a little helpless now. At this moment, Li Muki appeared and said in a low voice, "Divine King Valley and 10 Ultimate Shrine are not moving." Yi Xian said softly, "They are waiting for the people on the mountain to come down." God Sect ancestor said in a low voice, "Little guy, you were born with a 9th level life matrix. This is too attractive to those people on the mountain. 10 Ultimate Shrine and Divine King Valley don't dare to touch you, but the people on the mountain won't care." Yi Xian looked at God Sect ancestor. "Senior, do you know much about this Dao mountain?" God Sect ancestor shook his head. "Not much, because I didn't go up the mountain in the past." Yi Xian was a little confused. "Why?" God Sect ancestor was a little helpless. "Because you don't have the qualifications." Yi Xian was speechless. A moment later, God Sect ancestor and Li Muki left. Yi Xian sat cross-legged on the ground, deep in thought. He could already guess what would happen next. The people on the mountain would come down to find him, and he couldn't beat them. At the crucial moment of life and death, either his dad Qing or his big brother would come out. In any case, this was the plan from before. It was as if he, Yi Xian, had been arranged by fate. Rely on himself? He really wanted to rely on himself. But for now, even if the Azure Profound Sword was unsealed, he definitely couldn't beat a 9th level life matrix. They weren't on the same level at all, unless his bloodline was completely unsealed. However, other than his dad and Qing, no one could completely unseal his bloodline power. Moreover, even if it was unsealed, he couldn't control such a terrifying demonic bloodline with his strength. Yi Xian thought for a long time. "Dad, I also want to rely on myself to solve everything, but the enemy is too strong. I really can't do it. I know you don't want me to be someone who relies on my dad. Don't worry, I won't rely on my dad." After saying that, he stood up and left. Xiao Ta suddenly said, "Young master, are you really not going to rely on your dad anymore?" Yi Xian nodded. "I can't rely on my dad anymore. Otherwise he'll look down on me." Xiao Ta said in a low voice, "What will you do if the people on the mountain come looking for you?" Yi Xian frowned. "Don't I still have my sister? Xiao Tao was speechless. Yi Xian came to the peak of a mountain and sat cross-legged on the ground. He slowly closed his eyes to sense the azure profound sword. Soon, he felt the azure profound sword in his sea of consciousness. At that moment, the azure profound sword was locked by a ray of sword light, and it was his dad's sword light. Yi Xian said in a low voice, "Qing, you forged this sword. I know you can hear me. I want you to help me unseal the azure profound sword." Before he could finish, the azure profound sword shook violently. Boom! The ray of sword light that locked the azure profound sword shattered. Then the azure profound sword appeared in front of him. Yi Xian was stunned and then said, "My sister." At that moment, Xiao Tao suddenly said excitedly, "Young master, the seal that master left in my body has been unsealed." Yi Xian said in a low voice, "Little soul, can you contact Qing?" After a moment of silence, Little Soul said, "Young master, I can't contact her." Yi Xian thought for a moment and then said, "If you can't contact her, then forget it." Then, he looked at the azure profound sword in his hand and entered Xiao Tao's body. In Xiao Tao's body, Yi Xian entered the 8th space-time. As soon as he entered the 8th space-time, he used the azure profound sword to fuse himself with the 8th space-time. At the same time, countless mirror images appeared. With the azure profound sword, the 8th space-time was like his son. He could do whatever he wanted. It felt so good. Xiao Tao suddenly said, "Young master, aren't you afraid that you'll rely on external forces?" Yi Xian smiled. "Xiao Tao, do you think relying on external forces or living is more important?" Xiao Tao replied, "Living." Yi Xian spoke softly. "I have to live first. Obviously, my father only wants to train me, but he hasn't thought about how I should live." He paused for a moment and said, "Xiao Tao, what do you think my father was thinking by sending me to such a dangerous place?" Xiao Tao hesitated for a moment and said, "Master might be thinking that he'll give birth to another one if you die." Yi Xian's face froze. A short while later, Yi Xian used the azure profound sword to arrive at the 9th space-time. As soon as he entered the 9th space-time, Yi Xian's expression changed drastically. At this moment, he was in an unknown starry sky. It was deathly silent all around him, and he could see countless stars. However, they were far beyond his reach. Right at this moment, an old man in a gray robe appeared before Yi Xian. Yi Xian's expression changed drastically. "There's someone else here?" The old man looked at Yi Xian and didn't speak. Yi Xian hesitated for a moment and said, "You are?" The old man suddenly looked at the sword in Yi Xian's hand, and he frowned when he saw it. "You." Yi Xian hurriedly passed the azure profound sword to the old man. "Take a good look. You must take a good look." "Damn it, I'm afraid I'll be killed by you." The old man picked up the azure profound sword. A short while later, his expression became extremely solemn, and he looked at Yi Xian. "Who forged this sword?" Yi Xian said, "My younger sister." The old man frowned slightly. "Your younger sister?" Yi Xian nodded. The old man fell silent for a long time. "You, what are you doing here?" Yi Xian said, "Sightseeing." The old man shook his head. "It's dangerous. You should go back." Yi Xian thought for a moment and said, "Senior, you can use this sword to find the person who forged it. You can give it a try." Xiao Tao was speechless. "Damn it, this young master is too evil. He's starting to dig a hole for me." The gray-robed old man fell silent for a moment before he said, "The old man would like to see the person who forged the sword as well." As he spoke, he held the green profound sword in a reverse grip. In the next moment, the green profound sword started to tremble violently, and the surrounding space actually started to become illusory. A moment later, he suddenly clenched his right hand tightly and shouted, "Come out!" As soon as he finished speaking, the space in front of him suddenly split open. In the next moment, a ray of light suddenly stabbed into the center of his forehead. At the same time, the 9th layer of space in an area of hundreds of thousands of kilometers was directly obliterated. The gray-robed elder's eyes widened in disbelief. "I was King insta-killed?" Just as the gray-robed old man was about to disappear completely, Yi Xian hastily shouted, "Qing, show mercy. This senior is with me, he's one of us." Just as he finished speaking, the The sword light between the gray-robed old man's eyebrows suddenly disappeared. The gray-robed old man's expression froze. His intuition told him that he had been tricked. Chapter 1904. At this moment, the gray-robed elder's heart could be said to be extremely shocked. He had almost been wiped out just now. He did not even have the strength to fight back. He was at the 10th stage of the life chart realm. He was a genuine 10th stage life chart realm cultivator. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly said, "Sir, are you all right?" The gray-robed old man came back to his senses. He hesitated for a moment before saying, "I'm not worthy of being called senior. I'm Yao Jun, the keeper of the 9th space-time order." Yi Xian cupped his fists. Senior Jun Qing, did not hold back. "This," Yao Jun shook his head. No, it's my fault. I offended that senior. It's my fault." As he spoke, he hesitated for a moment before he said, "Young brother, who is that senior?" Yi Xian smiled. "What do you think?" Yao Jun was silent. He had not found the plain-dressed woman just now, but she had already sensed his presence. She had swung her sword from an unknown number of universes away, and he had almost been killed instantly. The strength of this strength had completely exceeded his understanding. This was also what he feared the most. He was at the 10th stage of the life realm, a true powerhouse. Although he was not invincible, he was still a rare opponent. However, he had almost been killed in an instant. It was too terrifying. Yi Xian suddenly asked, "Senior Jun, you said that you're the keeper of the 9th space-time order?" Yao Jun nodded. "Yes." Yi Xian asked, "You're in charge of this space-time?" Yao Jun hurriedly shook his head. No, I'm just the keeper of the space-time order. The real keeper of the space-time is the temporal temple." Yi Xian frowned. "The temporal temple?" Yao Jun nodded. "The 9th layer of space-time is very complicated, because this space-time is currently limitless, endlessly large, and its density is also endlessly large. Not only can it not be folded, it can't be twisted. It's as if the space-time is fixed. As for the temporal temple, they specialize in researching the 9th layer of space-time." Yi Xian asked in a low voice, "That means there's no 10th space-time?" Yao Jun nodded. "We haven't found it yet." Yi Xian was silent for a moment before looking at the azure profound sword in his hand. "Little soul, can you feel the 10th space-time?" Little soul trembled slightly. After a moment, little soul said, "I can feel it." Just as Yi Xian was about to speak, Yao Jun's face was filled with disbelief. "This is impossible. This is absolutely impossible." Yi Xian smiled. "Why not?" Yao Jun said in a deep voice. "The temporal temple has been to study the 9th space-time for countless years, but we have yet to find the 10th space-time order." Yi Xian suddenly asked, "Senior, is it very difficult to distort the 9th space and time?" Yao Jun nodded. "It's not just difficult. In our opinion, it's simply impossible because the space-time density is simply too thick." At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly held the Qingxian sword in his hand and gently guided it. In an instant, the space in front of him directly distorted. "Senior Jun, it doesn't seem difficult." Yi Xian smiled. Yi Xian smiled. "Mr. Jun, it doesn't seem that difficult." Yao Jun was speechless. At this moment, Yao Jun's expression was incomparably solemn, and his heart was in turmoil. This human could distort the 9th space-time order? It was too terrifying. Yi Xian suddenly asked, "Senior Jun, do you know Dao Mountain?" Yao Jun nodded. "I know about Dao Yi. What's wrong?" Yi Xian smiled. "Nothing. I just have some conflicts with them. They want to take my fate." Yao Jun was stunned, then said in shock, "How dare they?" Yi Xian sighed. "They are weak. Who else can they bully?" Yao Jun glanced at Yi Xian, and then he said, "My young friend, if that senior had acted just now, then wouldn't this mountain of the way have been obliterated with a flick of her finger?" Yi Xian said, "How can I rely on others? I have to rely on myself." Yao Jun Yi Xian asked again, "Senior Jun, I'm leaving." Yao Jun hesitated. "Take care, little friend." Yi Xian nodded. Then he turned around and disappeared. After Yi Xian left, Yao Jun immediately turned around and left. Not long after, he arrived at the Time and Space Palace. There were close to 100 time and space teleportation arrays in the palace, and a middle-aged man was sitting at the top of the palace. He was the temple master Si Qian. Yao Jun walked to Si Qian and bowed. Then he told him what had happened. Si Qian put down an ancient book and looked at Yao Jun. You were almost killed from countless universes? Yao Jun nodded. Yes. Most importantly, that young man could distort the ninth space-time order. He did it with ease. Si Qian narrowed his eyes. Really? Yao Jun said in a low voice. Absolutely. However, he probably did it with the sword in his hand. Si Qian stood up. Where is he now? Yao Jun said he left. Si Qian was stunned. Then he flew into a rage. Left? How could you let him leave? Yao Jun smiled bitterly. He said he wanted to leave. I didn't dare to stop him. I was afraid he would ask someone to kill me. Si Qian. Yao Jun hesitated. Temple Master Si Qian. What kind of divine being is that young man? Si Qian shook his head. How would I know? He looked at Yao Jun. Find that young man immediately. If you find him, invite him to the temporal temple. Yao Jun said in a low voice. There's one more thing. Dao Shan has his eyes on him. They want to take away his fate. Si Qian frowned. Is Dao Shan crazy? Yao Jun said. Dao Shan probably doesn't know the strength of the person behind him. Temple Master. If Dao Shan really attacks him, what should we do? Should we wait and see or? Si Qian fell silent for a long time. If that young man can deal with it himself, we won't care. If he can't, we'll take action. Yao Jun frowned. Offend Dao Shan? Si Qian said softly. It's worth it. Yao Jun nodded. Understood. Then he turned and left. After Yi Xian left the ninth layer of space, he entered Xiaota and started cultivating. Xiaota had been unsealed. 10 years inside was equivalent to 1 day outside. Now, he could use Xiaota to close the gap in strength between him and his enemies. With the Qingxian sword, Yi Xian directly merged with the 8th layer of time and space. Not only that, but he was also immune to the 8th layer of time and space's power of time and space. Most importantly, after using the Qingxian sword, he could directly fold time and space 4 times. In other words, although he was only at the 17th layer, he could easily kill someone at the divine spirit realm. He could even fight someone at the fate chart realm. But the problem was that everyone on the mountain was at least at the 9th layer. Thinking of this gave him a headache. But now he couldn't think about anything else. His top priority was to improve his strength. With the green profound sword and Xiaota, it was very easy to improve his strength. Not long after, Xuetong also entered Xiaota to cultivate. After discovering Xiaota's heaven-defying ability, Xuetong didn't leave. He stayed in the tower to cultivate every day. A few days outside was 10 years inside Xiaota. Yi Xian had reached the 19th layer. Not only that, he also used the green profound sword to perfectly merge with the 9th layer of space. He could now fold the 9th layer of space. To enter the 9th layer of space, only those at the fate chart realm could do it. To merge with the 9th layer of space was an impossible task. But he did it with the green profound sword. Right now, he didn't even know what level his battle prowess had reached. 10 days later, Yi Xian reached the seamless realm. He was getting more and more adept at using the space-time Dao. He could now overlap 1 to 8 layers of space. On this day, a middle-aged man suddenly appeared in the sky above Divine Sect. The experts of Divine Sect all looked up. In the sky, the middle-aged man swept his gaze over Divine Sect. Where is Yi Xian? The moment he finished speaking, a sword beam appeared in front of the middle-aged man. The person who had come was Yi Xian. The middle-aged man sized up Yi Xian and narrowed his eyes. You really do have a special bloodline, and you're born with a 9th layer fate. Yi Xian glanced at the middle-aged man. Someone from the mountain. The middle-aged man nodded. Someone from the mountain. Yi Xian's expression darkened. This guy had a 9th layer fate. At this moment, the middle-aged man suddenly said, God King Valley's Valley Master Twilight Valley told me that you come from a low-level civilization. This is truly interesting. A low-level civilization actually produced a person with a special bloodline, and one with an innate 9th stage fate providence. It's not just interesting. Yi Xian smiled. Did you come here to strip me of my bloodline and fate? The middle-aged man nodded. Yes. Yi Xian thought for a moment then said, Sir, I won't hide it from you. There's someone behind me. The middle-aged man smiled. I know there's someone behind you, but so what? Yi Xian smiled. Sir, do you not want to see the person behind me? The middle-aged man's lips curled up. Are you threatening me? Yi Xian shook his head. No, I just feel that you should take a look first before deciding whether or not to kill me. The middle-aged man stared at Yi Xian for a few moments before smiling. Then I'll take a look. Yi Xian hurriedly presented the azure sword to the middle-aged man. Sir, the person behind me is the person who forged this sword. With your strength, you can definitely use this sword to find the person behind me. Please begin. The middle-aged man glanced at the azure sword in Yi Xian's hand, and his eyes quickly narrowed. Your sword is rather extraordinary. Yi Xian smiled and said nothing. The middle-aged man glanced at Yi Xian, and then said, Then let me see just who the person behind you is. As he spoke, he suddenly held the green profound sword in his right hand. In an instant, the space in the surroundings started to tremble. After a short moment, the middle-aged man suddenly raised his head. And as soon as he raised his head, a sword pierced directly into the center of his forehead before piercing all the way down. Boom! The middle-aged man's eyes went wide, and his mind went blank. How the fuck did I get instantly killed? Chapter 1905. Dead. Even in death, the middle-aged man did not understand how he had died. On the side, Yi Xian put away the azure profound sword, and then returned to the Xiao Ta to continue cultivating. Down below, the divine sect experts glanced at each other dumbfounded. God King Valley. Within the tree hall, Twilight Valley reclined on a rattan chair. His right foot crossed over his left. His eyes were half closed, and his right hand was lightly tapping the chair beside him. At this moment, Maoshi entered the tree hall, her expression gloomy. Master, that person on the mountain has died. Twilight Valley's tapping finger stopped, and after a few moments she softly asked, How did he die? Maoshi hesitated then said, It's said that he touched the sword in Yi Xian's hand, and then he was silently erased. Twilight Valley's brow creased. Touched the sword. Maoshi nodded. Yes. After a long silence, Twilight Valley softly said, Although this person is not from the mountain, he is still no ordinary person. Maoshi sternly said, Master, I carefully investigated this person. He came from a level 2 civilization. Twilight Valley suddenly shook his head. This means that this person is not simple. Maoshi nodded. Truly, this person has many mysteries, especially the sword in his hand. It's said that when he wields the sword, he is immune to the pressure of space-time and the space-time abyss. Twilight Valley narrowed his eyes. Is that true? Maoshi nodded. It should be true. After a long silence, Twilight Valley said, The person on the mountain will not give up. Continue watching. Maoshi nodded and then withdrew. 10 Extreme Divine Palace. At this time, Muchio had learned that the person on the mountain had died. Upon learning this news, he heaved a sigh of relief. Rejoice. He was very glad that he had not let his head get to work and attack Yi Xian. Otherwise he might have been dead. A second generation. That bastard really was a second generation. Within the Xiao Ta. On this day, Yi Xian suddenly stopped cultivating. A moment later, he vanished, and when he reappeared, he was in front of Shuetong. When he saw Shuetong, Yi Xian was dumbfounded. Crimson Eye had already reached the life matrix realm. Shuetong slowly withdrew a candied hawthorn when she saw Yi Xian, and then she licked it and said, You seem very surprised. You've reached the fate realm so quickly? Asked Yi Xian. Crimson Eye blinked. Is it that fast? Yi Xian was stunned, and then he shook his head and smiled. He suddenly recalled that although only 7 or 8 days had passed in the outside world, 70 or 80 years had passed in Xiao Ta's body. However, even so, it was still very fast. This Crimson Eye was not simple. Blood Eye suddenly asked, You reached stage 20? Yi Xian nodded. He had already reached level 20. Ever since Xiao Ta was unsealed, his cultivation speed was simply incredible. Suddenly, Tong opened her palm, and the God-radiating scripture appeared in her hand. She looked at Yi Xian. This is not bad, do you want it? Yi Xian looked at the God-radiating scripture. I think this was originally mine, right? Tong blinked, and then she passed it to Yi Xian. What I mean is, if you don't want it, then you can give it to me. Yi Xian put away the God-radiating scripture. This little girl is very naughty. At this time, Tong asked again. Can you lend me your sword to play with? Yi Xian opened his palm, and the azure sword appeared in his hand. He looked at Tong and smiled. You want to play with this sword? Tong nodded. Just to have a look. Yi Xian smiled. And then he passed the azure sword to Tong. Tong held the azure sword, and after a while she frowned. No reaction? Yi Xian smiled. This sword can only be used by me. Tong glanced at Yi Xian, and then she returned the sword to Yi Xian. Your sister made it for you? Yi Xian nodded. Tong licked the candied fruit, and then she said, Ask her to make one for me as well. Yi Xian was stunned, and then he asked, Why? Tong said seriously, Didn't I tell you before? If your father is my father, then isn't your sister my sister? Yi Xian was speechless. Tong asked again, Is there a problem? Yi Xian chuckled. What do you think? Tong thought for a moment, and then she said, I'm strong, and I can fight for you. So, helping me is equivalent to helping yourself. Yi Xian patted Tong on the shoulder. I made my fortune by conning people. He turned and left as soon as he finished speaking. Tong continued to lick the candied fruit in silence. In the following time, Yi Xian started to try to break through to the seamless state. In fact, after the azure sword was unsealed, cultivation wasn't that important to him anymore. For example, even a 10th stage life matrix expert couldn't shake the 9th stage of time and space. But he could. However, he still had to go through this process. As for the problem of relying on external objects, he didn't want to think about it anymore. All he wanted now was to survive. If he really followed his father's method, he would be killed by the cruel reality sooner or later. But Yi Xian didn't know that the people of the temporal temple were frantically looking for him. One could enter the 9th stage of time and space from any world. So when Yi Xian left the 9th stage of time and space, Yao Jun was a little annoyed. This was because he realized that he had no idea which universe Yi Xian was in. After knowing that Yi Xian could distort the 9th stage of time and space, all the experts of the temporal temple were excited. They had researched for their entire lives, just to understand the 9th stage of time and space. But there was almost no progress. The 9th stage of time and space was a barrier for all life matrix experts. As long as they understood the 9th stage of time and space, they would have the opportunity to break through the life matrix realm and reach a whole new level. However, after countless years of research, they still couldn't understand the 9th stage of time and space. They couldn't even distort the 9th stage of time and space, let alone fuse with it. But now, someone could distort the 9th stage of time and space. All the experts of the temporal temple were excited. In an unknown world, Yao Jun smiled bitterly. If he couldn't find Yi Xian, those old fellows of the temporal temple would really kill him. He was helpless. When Yi Xian said he wanted to leave, it wasn't that he didn't want to stay. The problem was that he didn't dare to. After all, he was so close to being wiped out. It was too difficult. After a while, Yao Jun turned around and left. He continued to search. 10 days later, a woman appeared in the clouds above the divine sect. She wore a white robe and tied her hair into a ponytail. She had sharp eyebrows and phoenix eyes, looking very heroic. There was a young man standing beside the woman. The man wore a brocade robe and stood straight. His eyes were as sharp as blades. The woman suddenly smiled and said, I didn't think that there would be someone born with a 9th stage fate in such a low-level civilization. Saying this, she looked at the man beside her and said, Brother Xiaoyan, what do you think? The man called Xiaoyan smiled and said, It's indeed a little abnormal. I think the person behind him must be extraordinary. The corner of the woman's mouth raised slightly. Second generation? Xiaoyan smiled and said, Special bloodline, born with a 9th stage fate. If this person isn't a second generation, then what is? Looks like we have to be careful. The woman smiled lightly. Brother Xiaoyan, in terms of strength and background, who can compare to you? You were born with the world's strongest bloodline, the Flame God bloodline. Moreover, you were born with a sixth-stage fate. Most importantly, you have the world's second strongest space-time physique. Saying this, she shook her head and smiled. The scariest thing is that you also awaken the nether demon soul. Xiaoyan shook his head and smiled. Miss Lin Yao, since you're praising me like that, let me guess. You definitely want me to go meet this sect Master Yi first. It's best if I fight with this sect Master Yi until both of us are heavily injured. And then you can come and reap the benefits, right? Lin Yao was about to speak when Xiaoyan suddenly smiled and said, Miss Lin Yao, I'm just joking. How could Miss Lin Yao be so bad? I'm just joking. Lin Yao smiled and said, Brother Xiaoyan said you want to fight with sect leader Yi until both of you are injured. I don't think that sect leader Yi can threaten Brother Xiaoyan. According to what I know, sect leader Yi was only at the 17th stage, not even the divine spirit realm. But Brother Xiaoyan is now a 6th stage fate. As for the person behind sect leader Yi, in terms of background, who is stronger than you, Brother Xiaoyan? Xiaoyan laughed and said, Miss Lin Yao, you're making me a little arrogant. Lin Yao glanced at Xiaoyan and didn't speak. Xiaoyan suddenly smiled and said, he was born with a 9th stage fate chart, and he even possesses a special bloodline. Miss Lin Yao, if you obtain his fate chart and devour his bloodline, tsk. When he spoke up to here, he didn't continue. Lin Yao smiled lightly and said, Young Master Xiaoyan, aren't you tempted? Although your Yan clan's bloodline is number 1, I heard that sect leader Ye's bloodline is extremely special. If you devour his bloodline, then perhaps your bloodline will be able to suppress the entire Xiao clan. Moreover, sect leader Yi was born with a 9th stage fate chart. If you can obtain it, tsk. When they spoke up to here, the two of them looked at each other and smiled, each with their own thoughts. At this moment, the space in the distance suddenly trembled, and in the next moment, a man walked out. The man had long hair that draped over his shoulders, and he wore an evil smile on his face. Lin Yao smiled lightly when she saw the man. So it's Brother Yang Feng. The man called Yang Feng smiled and said, I thought I was late. I never expected that both of you wouldn't make a move. What? Were you waiting for me? Xiaoyan smiled and said, Brother Yang Feng, the two of us are slightly fearful, so we don't dare to make a move. Yang Feng roared with laughter. What? You want me to go first? Xiaoyan smiled. As you wish. Yang Feng glanced at them, and then he shook his head with disdain. Both of you are really tired of living. It's such a simple matter, yet you keep thinking about it. How boring. If both of you aren't going to make a move, then I will. As he spoke, he turned around and looked down, and then he stomped his right foot against the ground and roared with laughter. Yi Xian, I know you're spying on us from the shadows. Quickly come out here, and let me beat you to death. His voice rumbled like thunder and shook the sky. As Yang Feng roared with laughter, Yi Xian walked out slowly, and he smiled as he walked over to Yang Feng. All right. As he spoke, his figure instantly became ethereal. In the next moment, he'd entered the 9th level of space. After that, everyone watched as he swung his sword lightly, and the 9th level of space warped. The expressions of Lin Feng and the others changed drastically when they witnessed this scene. The 9th level of space was warped. Yi Xian glanced at Yang Feng, Xiaoyan and Lin Yao, and he smiled. The three of you can come at me together. As he spoke, he gazed at Yang Feng and grinned. I'll believe you if you attack me twice. Chapter 1906. Needless to say, Xiaoyan and Lin Yao were extremely shocked. Warping the 9th level of space. Not to mention them. Even their fathers couldn't do it. However, this human before them could actually warp the 9th level of space. That was too unusual. Even the arrogant Yang Feng fell silent at this moment. If he hadn't witnessed the warping of the 9th level of space, he wouldn't have believed it even if he was beaten to death. At this moment, he knew that this human wasn't as simple as he'd thought. Meanwhile, Yi Xian suddenly smiled. Someone came just now. He seems to be at the 9th stage of the fate chart realm. I don't know his name, But I know that he's too weak. He can't even withstand a single attack from me. How boring. As he spoke, he glanced at Lin Feng and the others. We're going to waste time. The three of you can come at me together. Xiao Yun and Lin Yao's expressions turned slightly unsightly. Meanwhile, Yang Feng suddenly spoke fiercely. Yi Xian, you're really arrogant, aren't you? Yi Xian suddenly looked at Yang Feng and smiled. Arrogant? Is that what you call arrogant? He shook his head and smiled. Let me show you what arrogance is. As soon as he finished speaking, his figure merged with the 9th level of space. Directly merged. Yang Feng and the others were dumbfounded by this scene. Merged with the 9th level of space. All of them were dazed. Meanwhile, Yi Xian suddenly laughed with disdain. A low-level civilization that hasn't even comprehended the 9th level of space dares to covet my fate and bloodline? How laughable. Yang Feng and the others had slightly unsightly expressions on their faces. Meanwhile, Lin Yao spoke abruptly. Young Master Yi, I didn't come here to become enemies with young Master Yi. I just want to get to know young Master Yi. Yi Xian looked at Lin Yao. You know me? Lin Yao grinned. Yes. Yi Xian smiled. Miss Lin Yao, I Yi Xian like to make friends. Let's talk somewhere else. Lin Yao was stunned, and then she smiled. All right. As soon as they spoke, they vanished on the spot. Xiao Yun and Yang Feng's expressions were unsightly to the extreme. After a short moment, Xiao Yun said softly, This Miss Lin Yao is really flexible. Yang Feng's face was gloomy, but he remained silent. He had never suffered such humiliation before. He had wanted to make a move just now, but reason won over impulse. That guy could distort the 9th layer of space-time. Not only that, but it could also fuse with the 9th layer of time and space. Xiao Yun suddenly said, Looks like we've underestimated this young Master Yi. With that, he turned around and left. After a moment of silence, Yang Feng also left. On the other side, Yi Xian and Lin Yao were walking slowly in the clouds. Lin Yao smiled and said, To be honest, we underestimated young Master Yi. Yi Xian smiled. Miss Lin Yao, can you tell me about the powers of Taoist Mountain? Lin Yao was a bit surprised. Young Master Yi doesn't know about Dao Mountain. Yi Xian asked, Do you think I should know? Lin Yao blinked. Young Master Yi, are you from a higher civilization? Yi Xian smiled and said, What do you think? Lin Yao smiled and said nothing. Yi Xian suddenly said, Miss Lin Yao, I'll take you to a place. With that, he brought Lin Yao into Xiaota. After entering Xiaota, Lin Yao was stunned. Soon, her expression changed drastically. This. Yi Xian brought Lin Yao away from Xiaota. Lin Yao clenched her fists. Her eyes were filled with shock. Yi Xian walked to Lin Yao and smiled. Miss Lin Yao, we'll meet again. With that, he turned around and disappeared into the distance. Lin Yao was silent for a long time, then turned around and left. Yi Xian returned to Xiaota and began to cultivate crazily. He had tricked Lin Yao and the others into leaving, but he knew that they would come back soon. His top priority now was to improve his strength as soon as possible. Xuetong stopped cultivating. She had reached the life matrix realm, so it would be impossible for her to improve in a short time. On this day, Xuetong came to Yi Xian. Yi Xian, who was cultivating, opened his eyes and looked at Xuetong. What's the matter? Xuetong took out a stick of candied hawthorn and licked it, then said, Tell me what might happen next. There are two possibilities. The first is that Dao Mountain couldn't resist the temptation and will kill you at all costs, taking away your bloodline and life matrix. The second is that they are afraid of you and start to investigate you. With that, she looked at Yi Xian. Can they find out who's behind us? Yi Xian frowned. Us? Xuetong licked the candied hawthorn. Your backer is my backer, of course. My backer is also your backer. Yi Xian looked at Xuetong. Do you have a backer? Xuetong nodded. My backer is your backer. Yi Xian. Xuetong said. Lin Yao was scared by you just now. The force behind her might become your helper. But I don't think it's very likely. Yi Xian was puzzled. Why? Xuetong said. Helping you is equivalent to becoming enemies with other forces. Moreover, they might want the sword in your hand, your life matrix, and your bloodline. With that, she looked at Yi Xian. All living beings are greedy, there are no exceptions. Yi Xian smiled. Then what do you think I should do now? Shui Tong thought for a moment, then said, Do you think Dao Mountain will give you a lot of time? Yi Xian shook his head. Shui Tong asked again, Can you reach the life matrix realm in another 10 days? 10 days was equivalent to 100 years. Yi Xian shook his head once more. Moreover, even if he could, he wouldn't dare to rush into it. It would not be a good thing to advance his cultivation realm too quickly. His current goal was the seamless realm. Shui Tong continued. Since that's impossible, we have to think of a way to deal with Dao Mountain. Yi Xian looked at Shui Tong. How? Shui Tong smiled. One word, pretend. Yi Xian's lips perked up. Great minds think alike. 2 hours later, Yi Xian and Shui Tong headed for God King Valley. The moment they arrived, Twilight Valley appeared before them. Yi Xian smiled. Valley Master Twilight Valley, I will be going to Dao Mountain. Twilight Valley was taken aback, and then he smiled. Take care, Sect Master Yi. Yi Xian walked up to Twilight Valley and smiled. Valley Master Twilight Valley, after I leave, you won't have any thoughts about the divine sect, right? Twilight Valley hurriedly shook his head. I wouldn't dare. Yi Xian smiled. I have received benefits from the divine sect and promised sect master, Shueixing, to protect the divine sect. So I do not wish for God King Valley to make trouble for the divine sect. Is that all right? Twilight Valley smiled. Young Master Yi, your journey to Dao Mountain is long. You must be careful. The meaning behind his words was that whether or not he would move against the divine sect would depend on whether or not Yi Xian could survive. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly unsheathed his sword and slashed. Unsheathing the sword determined life and death. And this strike was layered with 4,800 slashes. Twilight Valley paled at this strike, and she hurriedly raised the sphere of light in her hand to block. Boom! The sphere of light shattered and countless rays of blue light shot out. The surrounding space-time was annihilated, and Twilight Valley herself was pushed back tens of thousands of feet. But before she could stop, a sword was pressed against her forehead. The ninth space-time folding. This strike was so fast that not even Twilight Valley, who had reached the life matrix realm, could react in time. Twilight Valley was dumbfounded. She didn't even have the ability to fight back against this scoundrel. In truth, Yi Xian was also dumbfounded. He had never imagined that after he folded up the ninth layer of space-time, the flying sword would reach this level of speed. In that moment, the Azure Profound Sword had been so fast that not even he could react. Too terrifying. At this moment, Twilight Valley sternly said, Young Master Yi, my God King Valley will no longer touch the divine sect. Yi Xian looked at Twilight Valley. A moment later, the Azure Profound Sword sank into Twilight Valley's forehead. Boom! Twilight Valley was absorbed. Yi Xian shook his head and smiled. Naive. Promise? That thing was just like one's character. Oftentimes it was worthless. The Azure Profound Sword flew out of Yi Xian's hand. A moment later, all the Divine Spirit Realm experts in God King Valley were slain by him. An hour later, Yi Xian turned and left. It wasn't long before he returned to the 10 Ultimate Divine Hall. The moment he arrived, Mu Qiu appeared in front of him. Yi Xian was about to speak when Mu Qiu hurriedly said, Young Master Yi, my 10 Ultimate Divine Hall was wrong. Yi Xian was dumbfounded. Mu Qiu continued. I, Mu Qiu, had eyes but failed to recognize young Master Yi and offended him. I ask that young Master Yi be magnanimous, and let my 10 Ultimate Divine Hall off. As he spoke, he hurriedly took out a spatial ring, and placed it in front of Yi Xian. This is a small token of my appreciation. Please accept it, young Master Yi. Yi Xian looked at Mu Qiu. You know about God King Valley? Mu Qiu hesitated for a moment before nodding. Yi Xian suddenly slashed out with his sword. Swish! Mu Qiu's head flew into the air, and his soul was instantly absorbed by the Azure Profound Sword. Yi Xian issued a command in his heart, and the Azure Profound Sword flew into the 10 Ultimate Divine Hall. It wasn't long before all the Divine Spirit Realm experts within the 10 Ultimate Divine Hall were killed by him. Never believe the nonsense of your enemies, and never show mercy to your enemies unless you don't have the strength to do so. Who would lie when they had the strength? 2 hours later, Yi Xian headed towards Dao Mountain. On the way, Shuetong suddenly said, "You seem to be very strong." Yi Xian nodded. "I noticed it as well." Shuetong suddenly asked, "Do you know how to get to Dao Mountain?" Yi Xian's expression froze when he heard this. He really didn't know. Shuetong licked his candied fruit and said, "Are you joking?" Yi Xian glared at Shuetong, and then he brought Shuetong into the 9th layer of space. Even though he didn't know how to get to Dao Mountain, the guardian of the 9th layer, Yao Jun definitely knew. As soon as he entered the 9th layer of space, the space in front of him started trembling, and then Yao Jun walked out. When he saw Yi Xian, Yao Jun was stunned at first, and then he pounced in front of Yi Xian and said excitedly, "Young Master Yi, I finally found you." Yi Xian was stunned, and then he said, "Elder Jun, why are you looking for me?" Yao Jun hurriedly said, "Young Master Yi, the Hall Master wants to see you." Yi Xian blinked. "Your temporal temple?" Yao Jun nodded. Yi Xian immediately shook his head. "I'm not going." Yao Jun was slightly puzzled. Why? Yi Xian said seriously. "I'm afraid I'll implicate all of you." Yao Jun was even more puzzled. "What do you mean, young Master Yi?" Yi Xian sighed in a low voice. "Dao Mountain wants to kill me. If I go to the temporal temple, won't I implicate all of you?" Yao Jun immediately said, "My temporal temple isn't afraid of Dao Mountain." Yi Xian said, "I'm afraid." Yao Jun blurted out, "As long as my temporal temple is here, no one can touch young Master Yi." Yi Xian was about to say something, but at this moment, a voice suddenly sounded from the side. "Is that so? My Yang clan would like to see if your temporal temple can protect him." As the voice fell, a powerful aura suddenly appeared on the scene. Yi Xian looked at Yao Jun and said seriously, "Elder Jun, you will protect me, right?" Yao Jun. P.S. Please vote. It's the new year. Please vote for the new year. Chapter 1907. Dao Mountain's Yang Clan. Yao Jun's expression turned ugly. There were 3 great clans in Dao Mountain: Shao Clan, Yang Clan and Lin Clan. Although these 3 clans would usually compete with each other secretly, they would be extremely united in the face of external enemies. This was because the ancestors of these 3 clans were once good friends. Before they died, they had left behind their ancestral teachings that if there was an external enemy, the 3 clans must stand together and fight together. Temporal Temple might not be afraid of Dao Mountain, but Dao Mountain wasn't afraid of them either. If they really fought, the odds were 50-50. Yi Xian looked to the side and saw an old man walking over slowly. The old man wore a black robe, and his hands were hidden in his wide sleeves. His eyes were like knives, and his body emitted a domineering aura. Seeing the old man, Yao Jun's expression darkened. Life Body Realm. Life Chart Realm was divided into 10 levels, and after that was Life Body and Life Soul. What was Life Body? It referred to the strengthening of one's fleshly body. Generally, reaching the Life Body Realm meant that one had already grasped the power of destiny. This was an extremely mysterious power, and once one reached the Life Body Realm, ordinary godly items wouldn't be able to break through their defenses. The old man glanced at Yi Xian and sneered. Then, he looked at Yao Jun with a cold expression. "Your temporal temple wants to protect this human?" Yao Jun was about to speak, but the old man suddenly shouted angrily, "Don't talk nonsense. If you want to protect him, my Dao Mountain will declare war on your temporal temple. We will fight to the death. If you can't protect him, then leave immediately to avoid harming the relationship between my Dao Mountain and your temporal temple." Overbearing. Yao Jun's expression turned ugly. Declare war on the Dao Mountain? He definitely didn't have the authority to make such a decision. At this moment, Temporal Temple's temple master Si Qian suddenly appeared. Seeing Si Qian, Yao Jun heaved a sigh of relief. "Boss is here." Si Qian looked at the old man. "Are you threatening my temporal temple?" Yang Clan's elder sneered. "Threatening? Temple Master Si Qian, my Dao Mountain has no enmity with your temporal temple. Why would I threaten you?" As he spoke, he pointed angrily at Yi Xian. "This human killed my Dao Mountain's experts. My Dao Mountain is here to seek justice." Yi Xian glanced at the Yang clan old man, but did not speak. Si Qian glanced at Yi Xian before turning to the Yang clan elder. Sir, this young Master Yi is a guest of my temporal temple. If there's anything, can we talk about it another day? The Yang clan elder stared at Si Qian. Does that mean that your temporal temple is going to protect him? Just as Si Qian was about to speak, the Yang clan's elder spoke again. Hall Master Si Qian, this person belongs to my Dao Mountain. If your temporal temple dares to stop us, then that old man can tell you that from this moment on, we will fight to the death, until one side is exterminated. Hearing this, Si Qian's face turned ugly. Fight to the death. He wasn't afraid of the Dao Mountain, but was it worth it to fight the Dao Mountain for a human? One had to know that the Dao Mountain was no ordinary power. If they really fought to the death, even if the temporal temple won, it would be a Pyrrhic victory. At this moment, a voice suddenly sounded in Si Qian's mind. Hall Master, this human isn't simple. Our temporal temple can let him fight with the Dao Mountain, and we can sit back and reap the benefits. That's a good idea. Hearing this, Si Qian glanced at the distant Yi Xian. Yi Xian's expression was calm, without a trace of panic. That voice sounded in Si Qian's mind again. This person has no relationship with my temporal temple. It's not worth it to fight the Dao Mountain for him. The grudge between them is too deep. Qingqing Yi Clan Ancestral Hall. Ancestor, Yi Xian has no talent and no virtue. From this moment on, Yi Xian's position as prince will be replaced by Yi Lang. The one who spoke was an old man wearing a black robe. Not far behind the old man stood a youth. The youth had a faint smile on his face. This person was Yi Lang. On both sides were the Yi clan's elders. Why? At this moment, a timid voice suddenly sounded in the ancestral hall. Everyone looked over and saw a little girl standing at the door. She was about 12 or 13 years old. Her two small hands were tightly gripping the hem of her skirt. Her face was sickly pale, and she looked a little weak. There was even a trace of timidity in her eyes. This little girl was called Yi Ling, and she was Yi Xian's biological sister. When she heard that the clan wanted to remove Yi Xian from his position, she disregarded her illness and rushed over. The black-robed old man frowned. Yi Ling, what are you doing? The little girl called Yi Ling bowed to the people in the ancestral hall and said timidly, Great Elder, my brother Yi Xian is the prince. Why did you cripple him for no reason? The great elder looked coldly at Yi Ling. This is a matter of the clan. Why are you interrupting? Leave. Yi Ling was clearly a little fearful. She did not dare to look the great elder in the eye, but she did not leave. Instead, she mustered up her courage and walked into the ancestral hall. She bowed to the elders on both sides of the hall and said, Elders, my brother is currently fighting with the Li family for the mining rights of the mine in Nanshan. He is now fighting for the family, and it is unknown whether he is alive or dead. However, the family has used a groundless excuse to remove his position as the crown prince. Impudent! The great elder suddenly raged. Whether he is crippled or not, it is not up to a little girl like you to decide. Men, drag her away. At this time the new prince Yi Lang suddenly laughed. You should be flogged 30 times as a warning. The great elder coldly replied. Then do it 30 times. Very quickly, 2 Yi clan's guards rushed in. Yi Ling clenched her fists and said angrily, This is unfair. My brother has risked his life for the clan for so many years. Even now he is fighting for the clan. The clan is unfair to him. One of the guards glanced at the new prince Yi Lang. He knew that this was his chance to shine. The guard sneered. Young Master Yi Lang inherits the title of prince. What are you shouting for? As he spoke, he raised his hand and slapped Yi Ling's face. Slap. A crisp slap was heard. Yi Ling's right cheek instantly turned red and swollen. However, she did not cry. She only covered her cheek tightly. Yi Long sized up the guard and asked with a smile, What's your name? The guard hurriedly bowed. Subordinate Zhang Mu greets the crown prince. Yi Lang nodded. You are very good. After I become the prince, I will need 10 guards. You can be my guard from now on. Hearing this, Zhang Mu was overjoyed. He quickly bowed deeply. I will go through fire and water for the prince. I will not hesitate to die 1,000 deaths. Yi Lang nodded slightly. Drag him out. This person is disturbing the ancestral hall. Do not show mercy. Understood? Zhang Mu glanced at Yi Lang. When he saw the murderous intent in Yi Lang's eyes, he understood. He immediately grabbed Yi Ling's hair and dragged her out. At this moment, Zhang Mu suddenly stopped as if he had seen something. In the ancestral hall, everyone turned their heads to look outside. Not far from the ancestral hall, a young man was walking towards the ancestral hall. The young man was wearing a tight-fitting robe. The robe was tattered and covered in blood. The young man was Yi Xian, who had rushed back from Nanshan. Seeing Yi Xian, Yi Lang's mouth curled into a cold smile. In the ancestral hall, the elders frowned. The great elder narrowed his eyes. His face was dark and gloomy. No one knew what he was thinking. From afar, when Yi Xian saw Zhang Mu dragging Yi Ling, his face turned savage. Who gave you the guts to touch my sister? When Zhang Mu saw Yi Xian, his face changed. He quickly looked at Yi Lang and was about to speak. At this time, Yi Xian leaped in front of him like a ferocious tiger. Before the latter could react, Yi Xian's fist landed on his face. Pung! Zhang Mu felt dizzy, and he stumbled and fell. Yi Lang did not stop there. He rushed towards Zhang Mu again. At this time, Yi Lang suddenly roared. Yi Xian, he's my man. How dare you? Yi Xian suddenly stepped on Zhang Mu's chest. Pooh! Zhang Mu spat out a mouthful of blood. Seeing this, Yi Lang's face turned ugly. Yi Xian lifted his head to look at him, asking savagely, Your man? As he spoke, he stomped on Zhang Mu's face. Zhang Mu's face turned into a bloody mess as he screamed, Prince, save me. Yi Xian ignored Zhang Mu and walked to Yi Ling's side. Seeing Yi Ling's state, Yi Xian felt as though his heart was being cut by a knife. He clenched his fists, and his entire body trembled. When Yi Ling saw Yi Xian, her tears flowed. Brother, it hurts. Hearing this, Yi Xian's expression turned savage. In the next instant, he charged in front of Zhang Mu and kicked Zhang Mu's head. Pung! Qingqing Yi Clan Ancestral Hall. Ancestors above, Yi Xian has no talent, no virtue. From now on, Yi Xian's position as prince shall be replaced by Yi Lang. The one who spoke was an old man in black robes. Not far behind the old man, there was a youth with a faint smile on his face. This person was Yi Lang. On both sides, there were the Yi clan elders. Why? Right at this moment, a slightly timid voice suddenly resounded within the ancestral hall. Everyone turned to look and saw a little girl standing at the door. She was about 12 or 13 years old, and her hands were tightly gripping the hem of her skirt. Her face had a sickly pallor, and she looked a little weak. There was even a trace of fear in her eyes. This girl was called Yi Ling, Yi Xian's younger sister. When she heard that the clan wanted to remove Yi Xian, she rushed over despite her illness. The black-robed old man frowned. Yi Ling, what are you doing? The girl called Yi Ling bowed to everyone in the hall and asked timidly, Great Elder, my brother Yi Xian is the prince. Why did you cripple him for no reason? The great elder looked at Yi Ling coldly. This is a matter of the clan. What are you interrupting for? Leave. Yi Ling was clearly a little fearful. She did not dare to look the great elder in the eye, but she did not leave. Instead, she mustered up her courage and walked into the ancestral hall. She bowed to the elders on both sides of the hall and said, Elders, my brother is currently fighting with the Li family for the mining rights of the mine in Nanshan. He is now fighting for the family, and it is unknown whether he is alive or dead. However, the family has used a groundless excuse to remove his position as the crown prince. Impudent! The great elder suddenly raged. Whether or not he is crippled, it is not up to a little girl like you to decide. Men, drag her away. At this time the new prince Yi Lang suddenly laughed. You should be flogged 30 times as a warning to others. The great elder replied coldly. Then do it 30 times. Very quickly, 2 Yi clan guards rushed in. Yi Ling clenched her fists and said angrily, This is unfair. My brother has risked his life for the clan for so many years, and even now, he is fighting for the clan. The clan is unfair to him. One of the guards glanced at the new prince Yi Lang. He knew that this was his chance to shine. The guard sneered. Young Master Yi Lang inherits the position of prince. What are you yelling about? As he spoke, he raised his hand and slapped Yi Ling's face. Slap! A crisp slap sounded, and the right side of Yi Ling's face instantly swelled up. However, she did not cry, and only covered her cheek tightly. Yi Lang sized up the guard and asked with a smile, "What's your name?" The guard hurriedly bowed. Subordinate Zhang Mu greets the crown prince. Yi Lang nodded. You are very good. After I become the prince, I will need 10 guards. From now on, you will be my guard. Hearing this, Zhang Mu was overjoyed and quickly bowed deeply. I will go through fire and water for the prince, and I will do anything for you. Yi Lang nodded. Drag him out. This person is disturbing the ancestral hall. Do not show mercy, understood? Zhang Mu glanced at Yi Lang, and when he saw the murderous intent in Yi Lang's eyes, he understood. He immediately grabbed Yi Ling's hair and dragged her out. At this moment, Zhang Mu suddenly stopped as if he had seen something. Inside the ancestral hall, everyone turned their heads to look outside the hall. Not far from the ancestral hall, a young man was walking towards the ancestral hall. The young man was wearing a tight-fitting robe that was tattered, and there was blood everywhere. The young man was Yi Xian, who had rushed back from Nanshan. Seeing Yi Xian, Yi Lang's mouth curled into a cold smile. In the ancestral hall, the elders frowned. The great elder narrowed his eyes, and his face was dark. No one knew what he was thinking. From afar, when Yi Xian saw Zhang Mu dragging Yi Ling, his face turned savage. Who gave you the guts to touch my sister? When Zhang Mu saw Yi Xian, his face changed. He quickly looked at Yi Lang, and was about to speak. At this time, Yi Xian leaped in front of him like a ferocious tiger. Before the latter could react, Yi Xian's fist landed on his face. Pung! Zhang Mu felt a wave of dizziness, and he stumbled and fell. Yi Lang did not stop there, and charged towards Zhang Mu again. At this time, Yi Lang suddenly roared, Yi Xian, he's my man. How dare you? Yi Xian suddenly stepped on Zhang Mu's chest. Pooh! Zhang Mu spat out a mouthful of blood. Seeing this, Yi Lang's face turned ugly, while Yi Xian lifted his head to look at him, asking savagely, Your man? As he spoke, he stomped on Zhang Mu's face. Zhang Mu's face turned into a bloody mess, as he screamed, Prince, save me! Yi Xian did not care about Zhang Mu, as he walked to Yi Ling's side. Seeing Yi Ling's state, Yi Xian felt as though his heart was being sliced by a knife. He clenched his fists, and his entire body trembled. When Yi Ling saw Yi Xian, her tears flowed. Brother, it hurts, it hurts. Hearing this, Yi Xian's expression turned savage. In the next instant, he charged in front of Zhang Mu and kicked Zhang Mu's head. Pung! Chapter 1908. He wasn't calling for help. The old man from the Yang clan spoke fiercely when he heard Yi Xian. Since you're not calling for help, then this old man will beat you to death. He waved his right hand as he spoke. Kill. As soon as he finished speaking, the experts from the Yang clan charged forward. Meanwhile, Yi Xian suddenly took a step forward. Bang! A ray of light instantly drowned the space in front of him, and it didn't take long for a shrill cry to resound from within the ray of light. An expert at the 10th level of the Fate Realm had perished. Meanwhile, Yi Xian swung his sword once more. Bang! An expert at the 10th level of the Fate Realm was blasted 30 kilometers away, and a flying sword pierced through the center of his forehead as soon as he stopped moving. Bang! The expert's body was instantly crushed, and his soul was instantly absorbed by the green profound sword. The old man's face turned extremely unsightly when he witnessed this scene. He realized that the powerhouse at level 10 of the life realm could not do anything to Yi Xian at all. Not only could he not do anything to Yi Xian, but he was also being slaughtered by Yi Xian like a chicken. It was too terrifying. In the distance, Yi Xian was just about to attack again. However, right at this moment, an invisible giant hand suddenly appeared above Yi Xian, and then it slammed down. Yi Xian's expression changed drastically, and he suddenly raised his head and stabbed with his sword. Bang! The ray of light was instantly shattered, and Yi Xian was blasted out of the 9th level of space. When he stopped, his entire body split open, and blood sprayed everywhere. Right at this moment, the space he resided in actually started burning, and it seemed like some powerful force was approaching him. Meanwhile, Shuetong's voice suddenly resounded in Yi Xian's mind. Run! Yi Xian didn't hesitate at all. He turned around and vanished into the horizon. And as soon as he vanished, the region he resided in was instantly obliterated. It was forcefully obliterated. Yi Xian's expression changed drastically when he witnessed this scene. Suddenly, the space behind him cracked open, and then a fist smashed down towards him. There was no space-time pressure, nor was there any space-time suppression. It was just pure power. Yi Xian cried out in pain. What he feared the most was this kind of pure power. Unable to dodge, Yi Xian suddenly turned around and blocked with his sword. Sword domain. That fist landed right in front of Yi Xian. Boom! The sword domain instantly shattered. Yi Xian's eyes widened, and he was sent flying hundreds of thousands of feet away. He couldn't care less about his shattered organs, and he turned around and rode his sword, disappearing into the horizon of the starry sky. Not long after he left, the experts from the Yang clan appeared. Meanwhile, a voice resounded. He's heavily injured. All of you follow him. I'll be there in 2 hours. The leading old man bowed respectfully. Yes, Patriarch. Having said that, he led the Yang clan and the other experts to chase after them. On the other side, Si Qian looked into the distance. No one knew what he was thinking. Meanwhile, Yao Jun appeared by Si Qian's side, and he spoke in a low voice. Does the Hall Master intend to attack? Si Qian nodded. The reason Yi Xian's combat strength is so formidable is that sword. That sword is the key. We must obtain that sword. When he spoke up to hear, a strand of cold light flashed through his eyes. Yao Jun was about to say something when Si Qian suddenly vanished on the spot. Yao Jun remained silent for a long time before he sighed softly. He knew that his hall master had been blinded by greed, and he'd only seen the benefits before him, while ignoring the dangers that lurked in the shadows. A long time passed before Yao Jun turned around and left. He wasn't returning to the temporal temple, he was fleeing. His intuition told him that if he continued staying in the temporal temple, then a sword might descend from the sky one day, and he'd perish. Yi Xian was flying through the boundless starry sky. At this moment, his injuries could be said to be extremely severe. The shattering of his sword domain was the greatest injury to him. Not only had his body split apart, even his soul had suffered a heavy injury. He wanted to stop and recuperate, but the problem was that there were people chasing after him. At this moment, Shuetong suddenly appeared beside Yi Xian. She looked at Yi Xian and asked, "How long will it take for you to recuperate?" Yi Xian replied, 15 minutes. Shuetong licked her candied fruit and said, "Go back to Xiaota and recuperate. I'll block them for you." Yi Xian looked at Shuetong and asked, "Are you sure?" Shuetong nodded. However, Yi Xian shook his head. "Although you're at the life matrix realm, they're all at the 10th stage. You can't beat them." Shuetong said, "Lend me some blood." Yi Xian was speechless. Shuetong suddenly pulled Yi Xian's hand. "Stop wasting time." As she spoke, she suddenly exerted force, and Yi Xian's wrist split open. A stream of blood spurted out, and she sent Yi Xian into Xiaota's body. Yi Xian didn't think too much about it, and went straight to recuperate. As soon as Yi Xian entered Xiaota's body, the experts of the Yang clan appeared here. The old man who led the group looked at Shuetong and asked, "Where is he?" Shuetong licked her candied fruit and said, "He abandoned me and ran." The old man's eyes narrowed slightly. "He ran?" Shuetong nodded. "Yes." The old man stared at Shuetong for a long time. "Kill." He naturally didn't believe Shuetong. As soon as he finished speaking, he ordered the experts of the Yang clan behind him to charge forward instead of charging forward. Shuetong closed her eyes slowly, and Yi Xian's blood suddenly started to boil in her right palm. A moment later, she opened her eyes abruptly. Bang! A powerful bloodline pressure instantly swept through the surroundings, and one of the experts of the Yang clan, who was charging at the front, didn't even have time to react before he was crushed and obliterated. The old man's expression changed drastically when he witnessed this scene, and he hurriedly retreated. Meanwhile, Shuetong suddenly took a step forward and smashed her fist forward. Bang! A blood-red fist flashed through the battlefield and smashed directly towards an expert of the Yang clan. That expert's expression changed drastically, and he swiftly raised his arms to block it while space condensed. Bang! As soon as the fist arrived, the space in front of that expert was instantly blasted into pieces. At the same time, he was obliterated by the blood-red fist. Shuetong was just about to attack again, when the old man suddenly pressed his right hand down. Bang! The expanse of space where Shuetong resided collapsed. At the same time, she fell into the 8th level of the spatial abyss. As soon as she fell into the spatial abyss, the powerful force there started to destroy her. Shuetong's brows knit together slightly. She wasn't Yi Xian, so she couldn't disregard the spatial abyss. Suddenly, a sword appeared beneath Shuetong's feet. It was the green profound sword. The green profound sword had taken Shuetong out of the spatial abyss. The old man's face instantly fell when he witnessed this scene. What the hell is this sword? It's actually able to take someone out of the spatial abyss. Meanwhile, Shuetong withdrew a candied fruit in an unhurried manner. She licked it, and then she gazed at the old man. I'm out again. Are you angry? The old man from the Yang clan was speechless. Shuetong glanced at the green profound sword and spoke softly. It's so nice to have a younger sister. Even though she couldn't use the sword, it could help her. Moreover, she wouldn't feel any pressure at all when she had it by her side. Shuetong suddenly activated Yi Xian's bloodline again, and then she charged forward. The old man's expression changed drastically, and he retreated explosively, while another expert in front of him was instantly blasted into pieces. Shuetong was just about to attack again. Meanwhile, the old man from the Yang clan suddenly opened his palm and pressed it down. The space above Shuetong instantly warped, and then a powerful wave of spatial pressure swept down and was about to crush Shuetong. Shuetong frowned slightly and was about to retreat when Yi Xian's voice suddenly resounded in her mind. Don't move. As soon as he finished speaking, the green profound sword in Shuetong's hand trembled slightly. Shuetong's figure instantly became ethereal when the powerful spatial pressure descended upon her, and she was completely unharmed. The old man's expression instantly became unsightly when he witnessed this scene. Shuetong glanced at the green profound sword and sighed with praise. I like the feeling of being second generation. Xiaotao was at a loss for words. Right at this moment, a middle-aged man suddenly appeared here, and it was the hall master of the temporal divine palace, Si Qian. Shuetong gazed at Si Qian while his brows knit together slightly. Si Qian gazed at Shuetong. Tell young Master Yi that I want his sword. Give it to me, and I won't attack at all. You should understand what I'm doing if I attack. Si Qian thought for a moment, and handed the sword over. Xiaotao suddenly said, You're handing it over just like that? Shuetong replied, A wise man submits to circumstances. Understand? Xiaotao was at a loss for words. Si Qian was stunned when he saw Shuetong hand the sword over. He was already prepared to attack. However, he hadn't expected that this little girl would actually hand the sword over. Shuetong suddenly said, Don't you want it? Si Qian glanced at Shuetong, and then he opened his palm, and the sword fell into his grasp. After he confirmed that it was the real deal, Si Qian turned around with the intention of leaving. However, the old man from the Yang clan suddenly obstructed his path. The old man stared fixedly at Si Qian. This sword belongs to my Yang clan. Si Qian grinned. Do you know what realm of cultivation I'm at? The old man's pupils constricted when he heard this. A fate soul. Si Qian laughed savagely. You know that I'm a fate soul, yet you still dare to speak to me like that? Are you an idiot? As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly slapped his palm down. Bang! The old man from the Yang clan didn't even have the chance to react before his body was blasted into pieces. The expressions of the other experts from the Yang clan changed drastically when they witnessed this scene. Si Qian intended to leave after he killed the old man from the Yang clan. Meanwhile, Shuetong suddenly said, Since they're enemies, then why not kill them all? As soon as she finished speaking, she turned around and fled. The rest of the Yang clan's experts were stunned. Kill them all? In the next moment, their expressions changed drastically. Wasn't this F*** referring to them? They wanted to flee, but it was too late. In the distance, Si Qian directly sent out a palm strike, and those Yang clan experts were instantly killed. Si Qian turned to look at where Xue Tong had been standing. At this moment, Xue Tong had already disappeared without a trace. Si Qian hesitated for a moment, but in the end, he did not choose to chase after them. After all, there was no need to do so. The most important thing now was to bring this sword back to the Temporal Temple. The experts of the Yang clan had died with everlasting regret. P.S. Asking for votes. Chapter 1909. On the other side of the starry sky, Xue Tong stopped. Yi Xian appeared in front of Xue Tong. In fact, his injuries had already healed. Xue Tong looked at Yi Xian. Will you blame me for handing over the sword? Yi Xian smiled. Why would I blame you? Xue Tong looked at Yi Xian for a long time. You're so sneaky, but I like it. Both of them had the same thought. Leaving the Qingxian sword in Yi Xian's possession would be a disaster. Not only would the Dao Mountain come after Yi Xian, but the Temporal Temple would also come after him. Giving the green profound sword to Si Qian was tantamount to making the Yang clan and Temporal Temple enemies. This would buy time for Yi Xian. What he needed the most now was time. Yi Xian suddenly asked, Temporal Temple's Temple Lord killed the Yang clan's people? Xue Tong nodded. All of them. Yi Xian smiled. How ruthless. Xue Tong looked at Yi Xian. What are your plans? Yi Xian slowly closed his eyes. A moment later, he said in a deep voice, Do you remember the mysterious expert who attacked me? Xue Tong said, I think it was the Yang clan's patriarch. Yi Xian said softly, With my current strength, I can't fight against such an expert. Xue Tong comforted him. Don't be afraid. We have father. If father can't do it, we still have sister. Yi Xian. At this time, Xiaota suddenly said, This sister Xue Tong is already infatuated with the second generation. Yi Xian said seriously, Xue Tong, we have to rely on ourselves. Xue Tong nodded. I understand. Unless it's absolutely necessary, we can't call for help. We have to train ourselves. I understand all of this. Yi Xian. Xue Tong took out a stick of Tonghulu and licked it. Then he said, Can I ask a question? Yi Xian smiled. What question? Blood Eye looked at Yi Xian. Just how powerful is your sister? Yi Xian was about to speak when Xiaota suddenly said, Don't ask. You're invincible if you ask. The invincible sister Tianming. Xue Tong asked again, What about his father? The azure-robed man. Xiaota laughs. Let me put it this way. Master was once beaten by sister Tianming. Do you understand now? Yi Xian wiped the cold sweat off his forehead. Damn it, he now felt that it was too dangerous to be with this Xiaota. Ever since this fellow had been transformed by Qing'er, he had become so arrogant that he no longer cared about anyone but Qing'er. Xue Tong licked the candied fruit and said, Xiaota, this invincible. Xiaota immediately said, Invincible in all aspects. There's no opponent. There's nothing in the entire universe that big sister Tianming can't solve with one sword. Yi Xian was speechless. Xue Tong nodded and said, I understand. Yi Xian shook his head. Let's not talk about this. Our top priority is to cultivate. At this point, Yi Xian's face instantly changed. He suddenly turned around and saw a middle-aged man in a white robe, standing a few hundred meters in front of him. He and Xue Tong didn't know when the middle-aged man had appeared. Both of their expressions turned solemn. The middle-aged man sized up Yi Xian and said with a smile, I think you must think that my Yang clan should go against the Temporal Temple, right? Yi Xian said solemnly, You're the Yang clan's patriarch. The middle-aged man said with a smile, Yes. The Yang clan's patriarch, Yang Lian. Yi Xian smiled lightly. Why did you come to me first? Yang Lian walked slowly towards Yi Xian. Because I feel that you're the biggest threat. Yi Xian frowned slightly. I'm the biggest threat? Yang Lian nodded. You're only at the 20th rank, but you were able to take 2 of my attacks head-on. I've never seen such a monstrous genius like you. Yi Xian turned to look at Xue Tong. It's all because you're too outstanding. Tong looked at Yi Xian. We're on the same side. Don't pretend, alright? Yi Xian. Meanwhile, Yang Lian said, you gave the sword to the Temporal Temple on purpose, because you wanted my Yang clan to fight the Temporal Temple to the death, so that you could reap the benefits. Am I right? By Yi Xian's side, Tong said in a low voice, this enemy is quite smart. What should we do? Yi Xian thought for a moment and said, fists can't solve problems. We have to be reasonable. As he spoke, he looked at Yang Lian and opened his palm. A drop of blood floated slowly in front of Yang Lian, and Yang Lian's eyes instantly narrowed when he saw this drop of blood. Yi Xian said with a smile, sir, to tell you the truth, my father is not an average person. Right at this moment, Yang Lian suddenly took a step forward and smashed his fist forward. Yi Xian's pupils constricted. He practically didn't hesitate to grab Tong behind him. And then he took a step forward and activated his sword domain. Bang! A fist smashed down. Yi Xian's sword domain trembled violently before it collapsed, but the fist was still there. Yi Xian suddenly raised his arms in front of him, and the first 8 layers of time and space condensed into a space-time wall. Rumble! Yi Xian's arms were blasted apart, and then his figure was blasted flying. Beside him, Crimson Eye looked at Yi Xian, who was sent flying, with a dull look in his eyes. If Yi Xian hadn't pulled her behind him at that instant, then she would have absolutely been unable to resist that punch. Yi Xian flew for over 30 kilometers before he finally stopped, and a strand of blood sprayed from his mouth as soon as he did. Tong had just appeared in front of him when she opened her palm, and then the blood that sprayed from Yi Xian's mouth fell into her palm. Tong glanced at Yi Xian, and then she stuffed the candied fruit into Yi Xian's mouth. After that, she turned around to gaze at Yang Lian. Yang Lian smiled. Young man, you showed me your bloodline because you want to tell me that there's someone formidable standing behind you, right? As he spoke, he shook his head and smiled. If I saw your bloodline at the beginning, then perhaps I would have considered going against you. But now, enmity has formed between us. Since enmity has formed between us, then we're enemies. The best way to deal with an enemy, especially an extraordinarily monstrous genius, is to eliminate that person before that person can grow. Understand? As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly vanished on the spot, and then a powerful aura swept through the surroundings and obliterated the space here. A wisp of ferocity flashed through Tong's eyes as she stood before Yi Xian, and then she suddenly clenched her right hand. Bang! Yi Xian's bloodline instantly started burning. A moment later, she took a step forward and smashed her fist forward, and a strand of terrifying force swept out from her fist. 2 formidable forces collided head-on in the most forceful manner possible. Rumble! As soon as their forces collided, the space in the surroundings was obliterated and shattered into pieces. Tong was instantly blasted flying, and she flew over 30 kilometers away. As soon as she stopped moving, her body shattered into pieces, and only her soul remained. In the distance, Yang Lian glanced at his fist. His fist had completely cracked open, and his bones were exposed. A wisp of a solemn expression flashed through Yang Lian's eyes when he witnessed this scene. He knew that he'd underestimated this human's bloodline. It's absolutely not an ordinary bloodline. Who exactly is this human? A string of questions flashed through Yang Lian's mind. Yang Lian didn't give it any further thought, and just gazed at Yi Xian, and he didn't conceal his killing intent at all. It's better for such a monstrous genius to die young. When he thought up to here, Yang Lian took a step forward, and then he suddenly clenched his right fist. In an instant, the space around him had warped, and even the 1st to 8th levels of space had warped. Tong clenched his fist slowly. Meanwhile, Yi Xian suddenly said, I'll do it. Tong turned to look at Yi Xian, and Yi Xian grinned. Enter the pagoda. Tong gazed at Yi Xian. You'll die. Yi Xian immediately placed Tong into Xiao Ta. And then Tong intended to leave the pagoda, but was stopped by Xiao Ta. Tong spoke furiously, Let me out. Yi Xian paid no attention to Tong, and he gazed at Yang Lian instead. Yang Lian said, You were born with a 9th level fate chart. Come, let me see how tough your life is. As he spoke, he was about to attack. Meanwhile, Yi Xian's eyes slowly closed while the blood within him started to seethe. Bang! In an instant, a strand of monstrous killing intent and evil energy swept out from the surroundings. Yang Lian frowned when he witnessed this scene. This killing intent is quite unusual. At this moment, Yi Xian, who was in the distance, suddenly opened his eyes. His eyes were like a sea of blood. Bloodline activation. At this moment, Yi Xian hadn't activated his bloodline for a very long time, and the powerful killing intent and evil energy it emanated had directly suppressed his mind. Because Xue Tong had unsealed his bloodline in the past. Even though he'd only unsealed it slightly, it wasn't something he could control right now. Suddenly, Yi Xian opened his palm, and then a blood-red sword suddenly appeared in his hand. In the next moment he vanished on the spot. Hiss! A strand of blood-red light suddenly flashed, and it tore everything in its path apart. A wisp of a cold glow flashed through Yang Lian's eyes. He took a step forward and smashed his fist forward, and a strand of powerful force erupted from his fist like a volcano. It was a head-on collision. Bang! An expanse of blood-red light suddenly erupted, and then the starry sky in the surroundings was obliterated and transformed into a pitch-black spatial black hole. On the other hand, Yi Xian was blasted over 10 kilometers away, but Yang Lian was pushed over 3 kilometers back as well. Yang Lian's expression instantly became ferocious after he stopped moving. At the same time, he was quite shocked in his heart. The energy of this bloodline is actually so terrifying. Yi Xian suddenly walked towards Yang Lian with his blood-red sword in hand. Yang Lian stomped his right foot against the ground, and then a fist suddenly arrived in front of Yi Xian. Yi Xian swiftly slashed down with his sword. Bang! The sword light shattered, and then Yi Xian retreated explosively once more. This time, he retreated by almost 30 kilometers. However, Yang Lian had retreated by over 10 kilometers as well. Yi Xian's current strength was sufficient to shake him. Yi Xian was about to attack again when Yang Lian suddenly flipped his right hand. In the next moment, the expanse of space where Yi Xian resided collapsed, and then he was blasted into the 8th spatial abyss. But this time, Yi Xian didn't have the green profound sword. However, Yi Xian was still completely fine, because the formidable energy of his bloodline had directly resisted the formidable energy within the spatial abyss. Yang Lian's expression was slightly unsightly when he witnessed this scene. What sort of freak are you? Meanwhile, a voice suddenly resounded from the side. Looks like Brother Yang Lian needs help. As soon as this voice resounded, a middle-aged man appeared not too far away from Yang Lian. It was the Xiao clan's patriarch Xiao Tian. Meanwhile, another voice resounded. He really does need help. As soon as this voice resounded, an old man appeared on Yang Lian's right. It was the Lin clan's patriarch Lin Xiao. The 3 great leaders of Dao Mountain were gathered here. Right at this moment, a voice suddenly resounded from the side. Are you bullying the weak? That's not good. The 3 of them turned around and saw a woman walking over slowly from afar. Chapter 1910. Yang Lian's eyes narrowed slightly when he saw the woman. You're the person behind him? The woman glanced at Yi Xian, who had been thrown into the spatial abyss, and smiled. I'm his older sister. Older sister? Yang Lian sized her up and smiled. You want to save him? The woman smiled. Patriarch of the Yang clan. Forgive me for being blunt, but you're quite stupid. Yang Lian's face instantly sank, and he smashed his fist forward. Bang! The woman in the distance was thrown into the spatial abyss. However, the woman within the spatial abyss was completely unharmed. Seeing this scene, the expressions on the faces of Yang Lian and the other 3 underwent a wonderful change. The woman continued. In half a month at most, the temporal temple will far surpass your Dao Mountain. Yang Lian stared fixedly at the woman. What do you mean? The woman smiled. You're underestimating that sword. That sword doesn't just disregard the spatial pressure and the spatial abyss. It can enter the 9th layer of spacetime and fold it. Most importantly, it can fuse with the 9th layer of spacetime. Once Si Qian comprehends its secrets, his strength will instantly surpass the Fate Soul stage. Hearing that, the faces of the 3 of them sunk. The woman glanced at Yi Xian, and then she smiled. The most valuable thing in his possession isn't his bloodline or fate, but that divine sword. Why would Si Qian not hesitate to go against all of you to seize that divine sword? Because that divine sword can allow him to fuse with the 9th layer of spacetime, and allow him to attain a new height. The expressions of Yang Lian and the others were quite unsightly. The woman continued. So what if the 3 of you obtain this little fellow's bloodline and fate? It can't allow the 3 of you to attain a higher level. Yang Lian suddenly said. You want us to fight the temporal temple to the death? The woman smiled, and then she looked at the Shao clan's patriarch, Shao Tian, and the Lin clan's patriarch, Lin Shao. What do the 2 of you think? The 2 of them fell silent. Of course, they were thinking about that divine sword. The fact that the temporal temple had seized it by force proved everything. However, Yi Xian was also a threat. Thinking of this, the 3 of them looked at each other and decided to kill Yi Xian first before snatching the divine sword. At this moment, the woman had already entered the 9th layer of spacetime with Yi Xian. The next moment, the woman and Yi Xian disappeared. Seeing this scene, Yang Lian's face fell, and he was about to give chase when Shao Tian suddenly said, Stop chasing. Yang Lian looked at Shao Tian, and Shao Tian said solemnly, This woman is very mysterious. She was actually able to bring that young man out from the spacetime abyss. Her strength is extraordinary. Even if we catch up to her, we don't have full confidence that we can defeat her. Our top priority now is to go to the temporal temple and take back that divine sword, Yang Lian said in a low voice. We're letting Yi Xian off just like that. Lin Shao glanced at Yang Lian. Then why don't brother Yang Lian continue chasing after this Yi Xian, while the 2 of us head to the temporal temple? Hearing this, Yang Lian's expression turned cold. What do you mean? Lin Shao said indifferently. Nothing. I just want brother Yang to understand that once Si Qian comprehends the secret of that sword, our Dao Mountain will have to bow down to the temporal temple. Yang Lian was silent. The Shao Tendo said, Let's go to the temporal temple. After saying this, he and Lin Shao disappeared from the spot. Yang Lian was silent for a long time before he followed them. On the other side in the starry sky, a woman stood in front of Yi Xian. At this moment, Yi Xian's bloodline power had been suppressed by her. But Yi Xian had not woken up yet. At this moment, Shuetong appeared in front of the woman. She looked at her and asked, Who are you? The woman Qingqing Yi clan ancestral shrine. Ancestors, Yi Xian has no talent and no virtue. From this moment onwards, Yi Xian's position as the crown prince will be replaced by Yi Lang. The person who spoke was an old man dressed in a black robe. Not far behind the old man stood a young man with a faint smile on his face. This person was Yi Lang. On both sides of him were the Yi clan's elders. Why? At this moment, a timid voice suddenly sounded in the ancestral shrine. Everyone turned to look and saw a little girl standing at the door. She was about 12 or 13 years old, and her hands were tightly gripping the hem of her skirt. Her face had a sickly pallor, and she looked a little weak. There was even a trace of fear in her eyes. This little girl was called Yi Ling, and she was Yi Xian's biological sister. When she heard that the clan wanted to remove Yi Xian from his position, she rushed over despite her illness. The black-robed old man frowned. Yi Ling, what are you doing? The little girl called Yi Ling bowed to the people in the ancestral shrine and said timidly, Great Elder, my brother Yi Xian is the crown prince. Why did you cripple him for no reason? The great elder looked coldly at Yi Ling. This is a matter of the clan. Why are you interrupting? Leave. Yi Ling was obviously afraid and did not dare to look at the great elder. However, she did not leave. Instead, she plucked up her courage and walked into the ancestral shrine. Once again, she bowed to the elders and said, Dear elders, my brother is fighting with the Li clan for the rights to the mine. He is fighting for the clan, and his life is uncertain. But now, the clan is using a groundless excuse to strip him of his position. This is really unfair. Impudent. The great elder suddenly raged. Whether or not he's crippled, it's not up to a little girl like you to decide. Men, drag her away. At this time, the new crown prince Yi Lang suddenly laughed. He should be flogged 30 times as a warning. The great elder replied coldly, then flog him 30 times. Very quickly, 2 Yi clan's guards rushed in. Yi Ling clenched her fists and said angrily, "This is unfair. My brother has risked his life for the clan for so many years. Even now he's fighting for the clan. The clan is unfair to him." One of the guards glanced at the new crown prince Yi Lang. He knew that his chance to shine had come. The guard sneered. "Young Master Yi Lang inherits the crown prince's position. It's everyone's wish. What are you shouting for?" As he spoke, he raised his hand and slapped Yi Ling's face. Slap! A crisp slap sounded, and the right side of Yi Ling's face instantly turned red and swollen. However, she didn't cry. She just clutched her cheek tightly. Yi Lang looked at the guard and smiled. "What's your name?" The guard hurriedly bowed. "This subordinate Zhang Mu greets the crown prince." Yi Lang nodded. "You're not bad. After I become the crown prince, I'll need 10 personal guards. From now on, you'll be my personal guard." Hearing this, Zhang Mu was overjoyed and hurriedly bowed deeply. This subordinate is willing to go through fire and water for the crown prince, even if it means death. Yi Lang nodded. "Drag him away. This person is causing trouble in the ancestral hall. Do not hold back. Understood?" Zhang Mu glanced at Yi Lang, and when he saw the killing intent in Yi Lang's eyes, he understood. He immediately grabbed Yi Ling's hair and dragged her out. At this time, Zhang Mu seemed to have seen something, and he suddenly stopped. Within the ancestral hall, everyone turned their heads to look outside. Not far from the ancestral hall, a young man was walking towards the ancestral hall. He was wearing a tight-fitting robe that was tattered and covered in blood. This person was Yi Xian, who had rushed back from the Nanshan. Seeing Yi Xian, Yi Lang's lips curled into a cold smile. Inside the ancestral hall, all the elders frowned. The great elder's eyes narrowed, and his face darkened. No one knew what he was thinking. From afar, when Yi Xian saw Zhang Mu dragging Yi Ling, his face turned savage. "Who gave you the guts to touch my sister?" When Zhang Mu saw Yi Xian, his face changed. He hurriedly looked at Yi Lang and was about to speak. At this time, Yi Xian was like a ferocious tiger, leaping in front of him. Before the latter could react, Yi Xian's fist landed on his face. Bang! Zhang Mu felt a wave of dizziness, and he stumbled and fell. However, Yi Ling did not stop, and he rushed towards Zhang Mu again. At this time, Yi Lang suddenly roared, "Yi Xian, he's my man, how dare you!" Yi Xian suddenly stepped on Zhang Mu's chest. Pooh! Zhang Mu spat out a mouthful of blood. Seeing this, Yi Lang's face turned ugly, while Yi Xian lifted his head to look at him, asking savagely, "Your man?" As he spoke, he stomped down on Zhang Mu's face. Zhang Mu's face turned into a bloody mess as he screamed, "Prince, save me!" Yi Xian did not care about Zhang Mu, as he walked to Yi Ling's side. Seeing Yi Ling's state, Yi Xian felt as though his heart was being sliced apart. He clenched his fists, and his entire body trembled. When Yi Ling saw Yi Xian, her tears flowed. "Brother, it hurts, it hurts." Hearing this, Yi Xian's expression turned savage. In the next instant, he charged in front of Zhang Mu and kicked Zhang Mu's head. Peng! Qingqing Yi Clan Ancestral Hall. Ancestors, Yi Xian has no talent, no virtue. From now on, Yi Xian's position as prince shall be replaced by Yi Lang. The one who spoke was an old man in black robes. Not far behind the old man, there was a youth with a faint smile on his face. This person was Yi Lang. On both sides there were the Yi clan elders. Why? At this time, a timid voice rang out in the ancestral hall. Everyone turned to look and saw a little girl standing at the door. She was about 12 or 13 years old, and her hands were tightly gripping the hem of her skirt. Her face had a sickly pallor, and she looked a little weak. There was even a trace of fear in her eyes. This girl was called Yi Ling, and she was Yi Xian's younger sister. When she heard that the clan wanted to remove Yi Xian from his position, she disregarded her illness and rushed over. The black-robed old man frowned. "Yi Ling, what are you doing?" The little girl called Yi Ling bowed to the people in the ancestral hall and asked timidly, "Great elder, my brother Yi Xian is the prince. Why did you cripple him for no reason?" The great elder looked at Yi Ling coldly. This is a matter of the clan. What are you interrupting for? Leave. Yi Ling was obviously afraid, and did not dare to look at the great elder. However, she did not leave. Instead, she plucked up her courage, and walked into the ancestral hall. Once again she bowed to the elders. Dear elders, my brother is fighting with the Li clan for the rights to the mine. He is fighting for the clan, and it is unknown whether he is dead or alive. Yet, the clan is using a groundless excuse to strip him of his position. This is really unfair. Impudent. The great elder suddenly raged. Whether he's stripped or not, it's not up to a little girl like you to decide. Men, drag her away. At this time, the new prince Yi Lang suddenly laughed. He should be flogged 30 times as a warning to others. The great elder replied coldly. Then flog him 30 times. Very quickly, 2 Yi clan guards rushed in. Yi Ling clenched her fists and said angrily, "This is unfair. My brother has risked his life for the clan for so many years, and even now, he is fighting for the clan. The clan is unfair to him." One of the guards glanced at the new prince Yi Lang. He knew that his chance to shine had come. The guard sneered. Young Master Yi Lang inherits the prince's position, and it's everyone's wish. What are you shouting for? As he spoke, he raised his hand and slapped Yi Ling's face. Slap. A crisp slap sounded, and the right side of Yi Ling's face instantly turned red and swollen. However, she did not cry, and only held her cheek tightly. Yi Lang looked at the guard, and said with a smile, "What's your name?" The guard quickly bowed. "This subordinate Zhang Mu greets the prince." Yi Lang nodded. "You're not bad. After I become the prince, I'll need 10 personal guards. From now on, you'll be my personal guard." Hearing this, Zhang Mu was overjoyed, and quickly bowed deeply. This subordinate is willing to go through water and tread on fire for the prince, even if it means death. Yi Lang nodded. "Drag him away. This person is causing trouble in the ancestral hall. Do not hold back." Understood. Zhang Mu glanced at Yi Lang, and when he saw the killing intent in Yi Lang's eyes, he understood. He immediately grabbed Yi Ling's hair and dragged her out. At this time, Zhang Mu seemed to have seen something, and he suddenly stopped. Within the ancestral hall, everyone turned their heads to look outside. Not far from the ancestral hall, a young man was walking towards the ancestral hall. He was wearing a tight-fitting robe that was tattered and covered in blood. This person was Yi Xian, who had rushed back from the Nanshan. Seeing Yi Xian, Yi Lang's lips curled into a cold smile. Inside the ancestral hall, all the elders frowned. The great elder's eyes narrowed and his face darkened. No one knew what he was thinking. From afar, when Yi Xian saw Zhang Mu dragging Yi Ling, his face turned savage. "Who gave you the guts to touch my sister?" When Zhang Mu saw Yi Xian, his face changed. He quickly looked at Yi Lang and was about to speak. At this time, Yi Xian leaped in front of him like a ferocious tiger. Before the latter could react, Yi Xian's fist landed on his face. Pung! Zhang Mu felt a wave of dizziness, and he stumbled and fell. Yi Lang did not stop there, and he charged towards Zhang Mu again. At this time Yi Lang suddenly roared, "Yi Xian, he's my man, how dare you!" Yi Xian suddenly stepped on Zhang Mu's chest. Pooh! Zhang Mu spat out a mouthful of blood. Seeing this, Yi Lang's face turned ugly, while Yi Xian lifted his head to look at him, asking savagely, "Your man?" As he spoke, he stomped on Zhang Mu's face. Zhang Mu's face turned into a bloody mess, as he screamed, "Prince, save me!" Yi Xian did not care about Zhang Mu, as he walked to Yi Ling's side. Seeing Yi Ling's state, Yi Xian felt as though his heart was being sliced by a knife. He clenched his fists, and his entire body trembled. When Yi Ling saw Yi Xian, tears welled up in her eyes. "Brother, it hurts, it hurts." Hearing this, Yi Xian's expression turned savage. In the next instant, he charged in front of Zhang Mu and kicked Zhang Mu's head. Pung! Chapter 1911. Yang Lian and the other two had already rushed in front of Si Qian. 3 powerful forces charged toward Si Qian, about to crush him. Si Qian's expression was calm, and his eyes were filled with disdain. At this moment, Si Qian suddenly took a step forward and laughed. "Come, have a taste of my sword's sharpness." As he spoke, the profound chi in his body surged into the green profound sword like a tidal wave. In the next moment he slashed a sword to the end. Si Qian was stunned, because this sword did not have any strength. What was going on? Before Si Qian could think further, Yang Lian and the other two's powerful forces drowned him. Rumble! Si Qian was sent flying tens of thousands of meters away. At this moment everyone was stunned. What was going on? Si Qian, who had stopped, had his body completely shattered. At this moment his eyes were lifeless, and his mind was blank. After obtaining the green profound sword, he had been studying it with some scholars of the temporal temple, and had never used it personally. Therefore, he did not know that he could not use this sword. On the other side, Yang Lian said solemnly, "That sword is strange." Xiao Tian nodded. At this moment Si Qian, who was far away, suddenly swung the green profound sword fiercely. However, there was no strength in the green profound sword. Si Qian stopped, and he understood. He could not use the sword at all. Thinking of this, Si Qian roared angrily, "Yi Xian." On the other side, Yang Lian said solemnly, "He has been tricked." At this moment, Si Qian suddenly threw the green profound sword in his hand towards Yang Lian and the other two. Si Qian stared at Yang Lian and the other two. "The sword is yours." Yang Lian remained silent. Si Qian sneered, "What, you want to destroy my temporal temple? Forgive me for being blunt, but even if you can destroy my temporal temple today, how many experts does your Dao Mountain have left? Moreover, that Yi Xian is still secretly happy." Yang Lian glanced at Si Qian, then kept the green profound sword. "Let's go." With that he turned and left. Dao Mountain and the other experts also left hurriedly. On the battlefield, Si Qian said fiercely, "Find that Yi Xian at all costs. Find him." Not long later, all the experts of the temporal temple began searching frantically for Yi Xian. Yang Lian and the others had stopped in the starry sky. Yang Lian glanced at the green profound sword in his hand and said, "I'm unable to utilize this sword." Lin Xiao asked solemnly, "Can't you use it?" Yang Lian nodded, and then he passed the azure profound sword to Lin Xiao. Lin Xiao held the sword in his hand, and a short moment later he frowned. "Looks like only Yi Xian can use this sword." "Yi Xian," Xiao Tian suddenly said. "Find this Yi Xian." Soon, the experts of the Dao Mountain began searching for Yi Xian in a frenzy. Within the Xiaota, Yi Xian sat cross-legged on the ground. In front of him was a pile of soul crystals, which were currently being burned, and were constantly pouring power into his body. Gradually, a powerful aura emanated from Yi Xian's body, break through to the seamless realm. After a long time, Yi Xian opened his eyes. At this moment, he had already absorbed 1,000,000 soul crystals. Xiaota suddenly asked, "Have you reached the seamless realm?" Yi Xian nodded. Now that he had reached the seamless realm, he was still unable to contend against Xiao Tian and the others. The difference in their realms was still too great. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly said, "Xiaota, tell me, how did Qing achieve 10 years in the pagoda, but 1 day outside?" Xiaota said, "I want to know, am I still a pagoda?" "Yi Xian," Xiaota said, "Young lord, what are you trying to say?" Yi Xian said in a deep voice, "Space-time conversion." Xiaota was slightly puzzled. "Space-time conversion?" Yi Xian nodded. "The space-time inside the pagoda is different from the space-time outside. It should be said that the space-time inside the pagoda is higher than the space-time outside. Do you understand what I mean?" Xiaota said, "I don't understand." Yi Xian was speechless. He pondered for a moment, then said, 10 years in the pagoda, 1 day outside. This means that the space-time inside the pagoda is different from the space-time outside. Or in other words, the space-time inside the pagoda is of a higher grade than the space-time outside. Xiaota said in a deep voice, "Be more direct." Yi Xian said, "If I merge with you, is it equivalent to merging with this mysterious space-time created by Qing? Xiaota hesitated, then said, "Do you want to try?" Yi Xian nodded. "I think I can try, but I need your cooperation." Xiaota said in a deep voice, "Will it be dangerous?" Yi Xian said, "Probably not. Come, Xiaota, let's merge again." Xiaota turned into a golden light, and disappeared into Yi Xian's forehead. Bang! Yi Xian's entire body started to tremble violently, and his body gradually started to become illusory. Moreover, the space-time around him actually started to vanish bit by bit, and even the 9th layer of space-time started to vanish bit by bit. However, Yi Xian's face instantly turned pale, because he noticed that his body was slightly unable to endure the space-time within Xiao Ta. It didn't take long for Yi Xian to release Xiao Ta. He couldn't endure it. At this moment, his forehead was covered in sweat, and his entire body had split apart. Xiao Ta spoke in a low voice. "Young master, I don't think it's possible." Yi Xian shook his head. "It's possible. However, I can't endure it for too long." As he spoke, he sat down cross-legged and started to heal himself. 2 hours later, Yi Xian's injuries were more or less healed, and then he merged with Xiao Ta once more. To be more precise, he merged with the space-time within Xiao Ta. During those few breaths of time, Yi Xian hurriedly sensed the mysterious space-time. However, it was only for a few breaths of time. After a few breaths of time, he had to start healing himself, and then continue with the merging. Just like that, time passed by bit. Yi Xian tried again and again. After countless attempts, he could finally borrow Xiao Ta's strength to merge with the mysterious space-time. However, he could only endure for 3 breaths of time. After 3 breaths of time, he must separate from it. Otherwise, his body would be directly destroyed. Moreover, he needed to borrow Xiao Ta's strength. After merging with the mysterious space-time, Yi Xian began to try to use the mysterious space-time. He tried many times and finally, he could use the mysterious space-time's pressure. This made Yi Xian extremely excited, because he realized that the mysterious spacetime's pressure could easily destroy the 9th layer of spacetime. In the following period of time, Yi Xian tried again and again. Unfortunately, he couldn't enter the mysterious spacetime's abyss, nor could he change the mysterious spacetime structure. Not only that, he couldn't even feel the mysterious spacetime's density. He could only use the mysterious spacetime's pressure. However, this was enough for him. Of course, even if he wanted to use the mysterious spacetime's pressure, he still needed to borrow Xiao Ta's strength. Simply put, if he threw out the pagoda now, even the 9th layer of spacetime could be easily destroyed. Yi Xian sighed. This Xiao Ta was finally useful. Without thinking too much, Yi Xian left Xiao Ta. As soon as he left Xiao Ta, the space in front of him shook violently. Yi Xian frowned slightly. So fast. At this time, a middle-aged man walked out from the space in front of him. The person who came was the Yang clan leader, Yang Lian. Yang Lian stared at Yi Xian. "I've been looking for you for so long." "You." Yi Xian suddenly opened his palm, and Xiao Ta appeared in his hand. In the next moment, he tossed Xiao Ta out, and Xiao Ta transformed into a golden ray of light. In the distance, Yang Lian frowned slightly. In the next moment, his expression changed drastically, and he suddenly put his palms together and pressed them forward. Bang! In an instant, the first layer to the 8th layer of spacetime around him condensed into a spacetime wall. Xiao Ta arrived with a bang. Bang! The spacetime wall in front of Yang Lian shattered, and at the same time, Yang Lian transformed into nothingness. Yi Xian was stunned when he saw this. Is it that terrifying? Before this, he didn't know how strong the mysterious spacetime's pressure was. He only knew that it wasn't weak, but he hadn't expected it to be so strong. Instantly killing a life-soul realm expert? Yi Xian was extremely excited. Without thinking too much, Yi Xian put Xiao Ta away, turned around and ran. He could only use it once, and he had to heal for 2 hours after using it, because the exhaustion was truly too great. Not long after Yi Xian vanished with Xiao Ta, Xiao Tian and Lin Xiao appeared here, and they remained silent as they gazed at the nearby space-time hole. Yang Lian was gone. Lin Xiao spoke solemnly. It couldn't have been Yi Xian, right? Xiao Tian shook his head. He doesn't have that strength. It might have been the woman who saved him earlier. Lin Zhao's expression was quite solemn. Since he was able to kill Yang Lian without anyone noticing, then his strength. Xiao Tian's expression was quite unsightly. Lin Xiao spoke solemnly. Why don't we return the sword to him? Xiao Tian spoke fiercely. Will he let us go if we return it? He won't. We have irreconcilable enmity with him now, so he won't let us go even if we beg for mercy. Moreover, my Xiao clan can't bow and scrape to him. Lin Xiao spoke solemnly. My Lin clan can't do that either. Xiao Tian gazed into the distance with an icy cold expression. I'm going to the Divine Dao Nation. Lin Xiao frowned slightly. The Divine Dao Nation? Xiao Tian gazed at the green profound sword in his hand and said, I'm going to give this sword to the Divine Dao Nation. Doesn't Yi Xian have the ability to do so? He should go ask for it from the Divine Dao Nation. Lin Xiao hesitated for a moment and said, Are you really going to give it to them? Xiao Tian nodded. This sword is useless in our hands. Why don't we give it to the Divine Dao Nation, and let that fellow Yi Xian become enemies with the Divine Dao Nation? As he spoke, he glanced at the surroundings and said, Let's go right now. As soon as he finished speaking, he turned around and left. Lin Xiao hesitated for a moment and said, I'll go with you. As soon as he finished speaking, he hurriedly chased after Xiao Tian. Yang Lian's death had terrified both of them. After all, Yang Lian was in existence on the same level as them. Yet he died soundlessly. In other words, the person standing behind Yi Xian could kill them soundlessly as well. At this moment, they'd finally come back to their senses. On the other hand, the temporal temple was still searching madly for Yi Xian. 2 hours later, Yi Xian left Xiao Ta amidst the starry sky. He gazed at Xiao Ta in his hand and roared with laughter. I'm finally invincible. Meanwhile, Xiao Ta said, Young master, my intuition tells me that you won't last for more than 3 days before your enemies might advance again. Yi Xian was speechless. Chapter 1912. Yi Xian's face darkened when he heard Xiao Ta's words. Damn it, that's really possible. Right at this moment, a voice suddenly resounded from behind Yi Xian. Young Master Yi. Yi Xian turned around and saw that space was torn apart a few hundred meters away. And then a middle-aged man walked out. It was the temporal temple's Yao Jun. Yi Xian was slightly taken aback when he saw Yao Jun. Elder Jun. Yao Jun glanced at the surroundings and said in a deep voice, Young Master Yi, all the experts of the temporal temple are looking for you. It's best that you leave quickly. Yi Xian looked at Yao Jun and smiled. Why are you helping me? Yao Jun smiled bitterly. Young Master Yi, don't ask so many questions. The temporal temple will find you in at most 10 minutes. At that time Yao Jun's face changed drastically. They're here. They're here. Young Master Yi, take care. After he finished speaking, he turned around and vanished on the spot. Right after Yao Jun left, the space a few hundred meters to the right of Yi Xian was torn apart, and a middle-aged man walked out. It was the temporal temple's temple master, Si Qian. A wisp of killing intent flashed in Si Qian's eyes when he saw Yi Xian. Yi Xian, it's been so hard to find you. Yi Xian smiled. Temple Master Si Qian, is my sword useful? Si Qian's face instantly became ferocious. Yi Xian, how dare you trick me? Die, old man. As he spoke, he was about to attack when Yi Xian suddenly smashed his pagoda forward. Strike first and gain the upper hand. Si Qian's face changed drastically when he saw Yi Xian's pagoda smashing towards him. He didn't defend himself, but instead took a step forward and punched out. He used all his strength, because he didn't dare underestimate Yi Xian. Moreover, he felt danger. This punch caused the entire starry sky to boil, and then be annihilated. As Yi Xian's pagoda came crashing down rumble, the space where Si Qian resided was directly shattered, and he instantly retreated explosively. As soon as he stopped moving, only his soul remained. Moreover, his soul was vanishing at a speed visible to the naked eye. Si Qian was stunned. In the distance, Yi Xian's face was also a little pale. The consumption of using Xiao Ta was too great. He could only use Xiao Ta once in a short period of time. Meanwhile, Si Qian suddenly spoke with a trembling voice. Why? Yi Xian looked at Si Qian. What do you mean why? Si Qian asked crazily. Why? Yi Xian thought for a moment and said, Because I have backing. Si Qian's expression froze. His soul disappeared and he died. Meanwhile, countless experts of the temporal temple had appeared here. and their expressions instantly became extremely unsightly when they saw Si Qian perish. The Hall Master has been killed by Yi Xian? Yi Xian glanced at the experts of the Temporal Temple. Are all of you going to attack me together? All the experts of the Temporal Temple glanced at Yi Xian, and then they turned around and fled. Even the Hall Master had been instantly annihilated. How could they dare to continue fighting Yi Xian? Yi Xian didn't chase after those experts of the Temporal Temple. He was in an extremely bad state right now, and the important matter at hand was to recuperate. Yi Xian entered Xiaota, and he'd basically recovered an hour later. After he left Xiaota, Yi Xian sensed the green profound sword, and it didn't take long for him to frown, because the sword was quite far away from him. Where does that fellow from the Xiao clan intend to take it? Yi Xian frowned, and he chased after it a short moment later. 3 days later, Yi Xian, who was riding his sword in space, suddenly stopped. Tens of thousands of meters in front of him stood a majestic city in space. Yi Xian walked in, and he saw 3 big words above the city gate, Millennium City. After entering the city, Yi Xian was shocked. The city was very prosperous, and the streets were dozens of meters wide. Tall buildings stood on both sides of the street, and it was densely packed, giving off a slightly oppressive feeling. There were all kinds of living beings walking on the streets. Their auras were powerful, and most of them were life matrix cultivators. Yi Xian was somewhat speechless. Damn it! These life matrices were all over the place. At that moment, a carriage suddenly drove over from the end of the street. It wasn't 1 horse but 3. The horses were abnormally tall, and they were several times taller than ordinary horses. They were covered in black scales, and their hooves emitted blood-red flames. Everywhere they passed, they left a trail of fire. As the saying went, there were sparks and lightning along the way, and it was extremely dazzling. A woman sat in the carriage. She wore silver battle armor, and her long silver hair was tied into a ponytail. She held a blood-red whip in her hand, and when she waved it, thunder flashed. At that moment, someone on the street exclaimed, "It's Princess Dao Ling." Following this exclamation, all the experts on both sides of the street stopped and bowed. Yi Xian looked at the experts around him, and he was somewhat shocked. What kind of princess was this woman? Could she be a princess of the divine Dao nation? Just as Yi Xian was thinking, Princess Dao Ling's carriage suddenly stopped near Yi Xian, and she looked down at Yi Xian. "Why don't you bow?" Yi Xian was slightly stunned, and then he said, "I'm new here, and I don't know the rules of this city. Please don't take offense." Dao Ling looked at Yi Xian, and after a moment she suddenly said, "Disrespecting the royal family and blaspheming the dignity of the royal family. Execute him on the spot." With that, 2 mysterious experts suddenly appeared behind Yi Xian, and 2 cold lights slashed at the back of Yi Xian's neck. Yi Xian narrowed his eyes, and a cold glint flashed in his eyes. He opened his palm, and a sword light suddenly flew out. Chi-chi! The heads of the 2 mysterious experts flew into the air. All the experts present were shocked. This fellow dared to attack the royal family? Dao Ling sized up Yi Xian. "You're a swordsman." Yi Xian suddenly charged forward and slashed down with his sword. Dao Ling narrowed her eyes, and the blood whip in her hand suddenly swung down. Boom! A wave of sword light and blood light suddenly exploded, and Dao Ling was directly blasted thousands of meters away. Seeing this, the experts on both sides of the street changed their expressions, and they all turned and ran. Who was this Dao Ling? She was the favorite princess of the current divine Dao nation's king. Moreover, Dao Ling was the saintess of Spiritual Mountain. How noble was her identity! And now, someone was actually her opponent? In the distance, Dao Ling glanced at Yi Xian. "Do you know what you're doing?" Yi Xian was about to speak, when a group of cavalrymen suddenly charged out from the distant street. There were more than 100 of them, and all of them wore thick pitch-black armor and emitted a powerful murderous aura. The leader of the cavalrymen hurriedly came before Dao Ling and knelt on one knee. "This subordinate deserves to die for protecting your majesty late. Please forgive me, princess." Dao Ling said plainly, "Commander Chen, the one who deserves to die is not you but someone else." Commander Chen stood up and looked at Yi Xian. With a wave of his right hand, the cavalryman charged at Yi Xian. At this moment, Yi Xian opened his palm, and a sword light suddenly flew out. Chi! 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 In an instant, the heads of all the cavalrymen flew out, and 100 streams of blood shot into the sky like a fountain. It was extremely bloody. Commander Chen's expression changed drastically at the sight of this, and he hurriedly said, "Princess, you leave first." There was a hint of seriousness in Dao Ling's eyes. She stared at Yi Xian and asked, "Do you know what you're doing?" Yi Xian smiled. "Are you trying to say that you have a backer?" Dao Ling looked at Yi Xian. "You're provoking the Dao God Nation and Spirit Mountain, and you'll pay the most painful price for this." Yi Xian was slightly puzzled. "You provoked me first, didn't you?" Dao Ling was expressionless. "You don't respect the imperial family, so you deserve to die." Yi Xian sneered. "What a joke. I was born with an unyielding character. Why would I bow down to a woman like you?" As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly charged forward and slashed with his sword, drawing a sword to decide life and death. The moment the sword slashed down, a powerful force of sword Dao instantly shattered the space-time in front of him. Dao Ling's expression changed drastically. She waved her right hand, and the blood whip in her hand swept across with a powerful bolt of blood lightning. Head on. Boom. The blood light suddenly shattered, and the blood whip in Dao Ling's hand shattered. At the same time, she was instantly sent flying out of the city. As soon as she stopped, a flying sword suddenly slashed at her. Dao Ling's pupils suddenly shrank. At this moment she smelled the scent of death. But at this critical moment, a shadow suddenly appeared above her head. The next moment, Yi Xian's flying sword stopped. Seeing this scene, the cavalry commander nearby was so frightened that he collapsed to the ground. If Dao Ling died here, then they would be in big trouble. In the distance, Yi Xian looked at the shadow above Dao Ling's head. The shadow was very blurry, and its true appearance could not be seen clearly. However, it was not the real body, but a wisp of shadow. At this moment Dao Ling bowed slightly. "Master." "A powerhouse of Spirit Mountain." The shadow looked at Yi Xian. "You have such a high level of sword Dao cultivation at such a young age. Who are you?" Yi Xian shook his head. "An outsider who has just arrived." The shadow frowned slightly. "Just arrived?" Yi Xian pointed at Dao Ling not far away. "I just arrived and don't know the rules here. Your disciple saw that I did not bow to her, and wanted to kill me. Do you think this?" The shadow suddenly said. "You did not bow to her, and she wanted to kill you. What's wrong with that?" Yi Xian was struck dumb. Then he smiled and said, "Why should I bow to her?" The shadow looked straight at Yi Xian. "Don't you know that she is the princess of the divine Dao Nation, and the holy lady of Spirit Mountain?" Yi Xian frowned slightly. "Just because of that I should bow to her?" The shadow looked at Yi Xian for a moment and said, "Why don't you bow to her?" A sinister look flashed in Yi Xian's eyes. "The princess of the divine Dao Nation? The holy lady of Spirit Mountain? My father is invincible, my brother is invincible, and my sister is invincible. Am I proud? Ah. F*CKU. As he spoke he opened his palm, and Xiao Tao appeared in his hand. In the next moment he suddenly threw him. Boom! The shadow was directly smashed into nothingness by Xiao Tao. At the same time, Dao Ling's physical body was directly shattered by the powerful shockwave, leaving only her soul. P.S. I was too busy returning to my hometown. I'm afraid of losing my roots. Don't mind if I lose my roots. Forgive me. The Divine Dao Nation. The Divine Dao Nation was located in the Divine Dao Star region. In the past, the Divine Dao Star region was extremely chaotic, and there were hundreds of thousands of forces of various sizes. But in the end, a divine emperor appeared in the Divine Dao Star region, and he unified the entire Divine Dao Star region in a short 100 years. He established an unprecedented super force, the Divine Dao Nation. A woman walked slowly in a hall in the Divine Dao Nation's imperial palace. She held a thick ancient book in her hand. The woman read very seriously, and the corners of her mouth curled up from time to time into a charming smile. The woman wore a wide white dress, and there was a soaring purple phoenix at the end of the dress. The phoenix's eyes were sharp as it looked down upon the world. The woman was the current king of the divine Dao nation, Shen Daoling. She was known as the most powerful woman in the universe. Right at this moment, an old man walked to the entrance of the hall. When he saw Shen Daoling reading, the old man's right foot that was about to step into the hall stopped in midair. He hesitated for a moment before walking in the end. At this moment, Shen Daoling put down the book in her hand and turned to look at the old man. She smiled. What happened? The old man bowed slightly. Your Majesty, Princess Ling is dead. Shen Daoling. Shen Daoling walked slowly to the entrance of the hall with a calm expression. Who killed her? The old man said. A youth of unknown origin. Shen Daoling smiled. Unknown origin? The old man nodded. Unknown origin. We only know that the other party is a swordsman. Moreover, the other party is only at the Seamless Realm. Shen Daoling blinked. And Seamless Realm cultivator killed Ling, who has already reached the life body realm? The old man nodded. Shen Daoling smiled. Interesting. The old man bowed slightly. Your Majesty, I have already sent the Imperial Spirit Divine Guards to capture this person. Do you want him dead or alive? Shen Daoling chuckled and said, Lord Musa, a young man at the Seamless Realm was able to kill someone at the Life Physique Realm. Moreover, the other party was someone who knew Linger's identity, yet he still dared to kill her. Do you think he's an ordinary person? Musa's expression was calm. No matter where he came from, since he dared to kill Princess Ling, he is looking down on our divine Dao nation. He should have his entire family executed. Shen Daoling smiled. Spiritual Mountain is already searching for this person? Musa nodded. Shen Daoling said. Then wait for now and watch Spiritual Mountain's performance first. Musa glanced at Shen Daoling and nodded. I understand. After saying that, he paused and said, Your Majesty, Dao Mountain's Shao clan leader requests an audience, saying that he has a divine item to offer to your Majesty. Shen Daoling frowned slightly. Dao Mountain? Musa nodded. A very remote starfield. Because there is no value there. It is not within our divine Dao nation's territory. Shen Daoling asked. He said he has a divine item to give me? Musa nodded. Also he wants to give it to your Majesty in person. Shen Daoling smiled. Interesting, let him see me. Musa nodded and then he left. It didn't take long for Xiao Tian and Lin Xiao to arrive before the hall. They were just about to raise their heads to look at the divine Dao plume, when an invisible pressure enveloped them, causing their expressions to change drastically, and they hurriedly lowered their heads. At the same time, they were astounded to the extreme. They were life soul realm cultivators. Yet this woman could suppress them with just an aura. How terrifying was that? Shen Daoling sat down at the side and smiled. You want to give me a divine item? Xiao Tian hurriedly said. Yes. As he spoke, he opened his palm, and the green profound sword floated over to Shen Daoling. The smile on Shen Daoling's face instantly vanished when she laid eyes on the sword. It was replaced by a solemn expression. Meanwhile, Xiao Tian hurriedly said, Your Majesty, we obtained this by chance. The knowledge of time and space contained within this sword far exceeds our understanding. So we've specially offered this sword to your Majesty. Shen Daoling held the sword and looked at it for a short while before she gazed at Xiao Tian. Where did you obtain this sword? Xiao Tian hesitated for a moment and was about to speak when Shen Daoling said, I'll only give you one chance to speak. Think it through. Xiao Tian was shocked and did not dare to play any more tricks. He immediately said, The two of us obtained it from a young man. Shen Daoling frowned slightly. A young man? Xiao Tian hurriedly nodded. Yes. Shen Daoling said. Tell me about that young man. Xiao Tian didn't understand, but he didn't dare refuse, so he immediately told her about Yi Xian. At the side, Musa furrowed his brows. Shen Daoling gazed at Musa, and the latter nodded. It should be that young man. Shen Daoling chuckled. Interesting. As she spoke, she glanced at Xiao Tian and Lin Xiao. I really like this sword. What reward do the two of you want? Both of them were overjoyed when they heard this, and Xiao Tian hurriedly said, It's good that you like it, Your Majesty. As for the reward, Your Majesty, feel free to do as you please. Shen Daoling gazed at Musa. Take them away and entertain them well. Musa glanced at Shen Daoling and nodded slightly. Understood. As he spoke, he gazed at Xiao Tian and Lin Xiao. Come with me. Xiao Tian and Lin Xiao hurriedly bowed respectfully to Shen Daoling, and then they turned around and left with Musa. Within the hall, Shen Daoling gazed at the green profound sword in her hand, and clearly fell silent. The green profound sword. In next to no time, Musa appeared within the hall, and she spoke in a low voice. Your Majesty, this sword? Shen Daoling handed the green profound sword to Musa. Take a look at it. Musa glanced at the green profound sword before him, and his expression became solemn. This sword, Shen Daoling said, summon the palace master of the Shengong Palace, Mu Qiao. Musa immediately turned around and left. A few moments later, Musa brought a white-haired old man into the hall. This person was the palace master of the Shengong Palace, Mu Qiao, and he was responsible for the forging of the weapons of the entire Divine Dao nation. Mu Qiao bowed respectfully to Shen Daoling. Your Majesty. Shen Daoling pointed with a finger, and the green profound sword landed before Mu Qiao. Take a look at this sword. Mu Qiao picked up the green profound sword and sized it up. Moments later, his expression became solemn. This sword, may I ask Your Majesty, where did you get this sword from? Shen Daoling asked. Can you forge this sword? Mu Qiao glanced at the green profound sword and hesitated for a moment before he said, This, compared to the person who forged this sword, I might still be a little lacking. A little. Shen Daoling said calmly, Then you can't. Mu Qiao hurriedly said, If Your Majesty is willing to let me study this sword for half a year, I'll definitely be able to forge a divine item that surpasses this sword. Shen Daoling shook her head. You can't. Mu Qiao was quite confused. Why not? Shen Daoling looked at the green profound sword in his hand and said softly, The Tao of space and time contained within this sword is unfamiliar to even me. Mu Qiao hurriedly said, Your Majesty, let me study this sword for a month. In a month, I'll definitely be able to forge a sword that surpasses this sword. Shen Daoling suddenly said, If you can't, you can resign and go home to retire. Is that all right? Mu Qiao's expression froze, and he bowed slightly moments later. Your Majesty, the old man still has matters to attend to, so I'll be taking my leave. After saying that, he turned around and left. Shen Daoling shook her head and looked at Musa. Investigate this person's background. Musa nodded before turning around and leaving. Within the palace, Shen Daoling looked at the green profound sword in his hand, and after a short while she grinned. I know you have a spirit, so I won't ask anything else. I just want to ask a question. What grade of sword do you belong to? Soul fell silent for a moment before saying, There's no grade. I'm invincible below 3 swords. Chapter 1914. Under 3 strikes? The divine Daoling smiled. Which 3 strikes? Soul replied, Big brother young master's father, and young master's younger sister. The divine Daoling's eyes narrowed slightly. Young master? Soul replied, Yes. The divine Daoling suddenly turned around. Guards. Meanwhile, a man in black armor, who carried a huge saber on his back, walked in. The divine Daoling said, Send my decree. Tell the spirit mountain not to make things difficult for that young man. The armored man bowed slightly, turned around and left. The divine Daoling's expression gradually turned solemn as he gazed at the green profound sword in his grasp. Yi Xian walked slowly through an unknown mountain range. His destination was the divine Dao nation's capital, because he sensed that the green profound sword was there. At this moment, the space in front of him suddenly trembled. Yi Xian's expression was calm. The reason he hadn't flown on his sword was because he wanted to avoid some trouble. He hadn't expected that they would be able to find him just by walking. Since it was like that, then it was over. At this moment, a woman suddenly walked out from the crack in space. It was the Spirit Mountain's Grand Elder Lan Ling. Lan Ling gazed at Yi Xian. Since you dared to disregard my Spirit Mountain and the Divine Dao Nation, then I presume your background isn't simple. However, I'm very curious about the power behind you. Yi Xian smiled. There's no enmity between me and the Spirit Mountain, and I have no intention of offending it. It was your holy maiden who wanted to kill me first. You. Lan Ling shook her head. I didn't come here to listen to you. When she spoke up to this point, she walked slowly towards Yi Xian. The strong have no need to listen to the weak. Understand? Yi Xian suddenly tossed. Bang! A ray of golden light suddenly flashed across the battlefield. Lan Ling's expression instantly changed drastically. She opened her right hand, and a golden shield suddenly appeared in front of her. Bang! The golden round shield shattered, and Lan Ling's physical body was crushed along with it. Lan Ling, who only had her soul left, was stunned. At this moment, a sword suddenly pressed against Lan Ling's forehead. Lan Ling's expression changed drastically. If you dare touch me, the spiritual mountain will slaughter your entire sect. Yi Xian blinked. If you want to slaughter me, I'm a little afraid, but if you want to slaughter my entire family... At this point he said seriously, don't stand on ceremony. Quickly go slaughter them, especially my father. You're welcome to go find him. Don't hold back. Use all your strength to beat him up. Lan Ling glared at Yi Xian. I underestimated you. Now we can talk. Yi Xian was so angry that he laughed. I want to reason with you, but you want to talk to me with your fists. I want to talk to you with my fists, but you want to reason with me. I'm not your father. Why should I spoil you? As he spoke, he suddenly punched out. Boom! Lan Ling was blasted into nothingness by the punch. Completely erased. Right at this moment, an extremely terrifying aura suddenly swept down from the distant horizon. In next to no time, the horizon split open, and a middle-aged man walked out from within. Mount Master of the Spiritual Mountain, Emolian. Along with Emolian's appearance, dozens of spiritual mountain powerhouses appeared. Among them, there were a total of 12 life soul realm powerhouses. They were surrounded. Yi Xian's expression was calm. Xiao Ta suddenly said, Young lord, it was a moment of pleasure to kill. How are you going to clean up now? Yi Xian said calmly, What can I do? If it were you, Xiao Ta, would you take it lying down? Xiao Ta said, Young lord, I've never seen you so unyielding towards master. Yi Xian said, That's my father. Isn't it only right and proper for me to give in to him? If he wasn't my father, I would've. Xiao Ta said calmly, What do you mean by that? Young lord, you sound like you can beat master. Yi Xian shook his head. Xiao Ta, how did father tolerate you until now? Xiao Ta. At this moment, Emolian suddenly said, You killed our holy maiden and grand elder of Spiritual Mountain. How dare you? Yi Xian was about to speak, but Emolian suddenly said, Kill. As soon as he finished speaking, he flipped his palm. In an instant, the space around Yi Xian suddenly transformed into a cage, and the experts from the Spiritual Mountain were about to attack. However, a middle-aged man suddenly appeared here. The middle-aged man wore black armor and carried a large saber on his back. Seeing him, Emolian frowned. Lord Enzua. Enzua said, His Majesty has decreed that all powerhouses of Spiritual Mountain return immediately. Return immediately. Hearing this, Emolian frowned. Return immediately? Lord Enzua, what does His Majesty mean? Enzua looked at Emolian. Return. Emolian pointed at Yi Xian angrily. Lord Enzua, this person killed Princess Lingyu. Enzua said, Return immediately. Emolian's expression was somewhat ugly. Enzua. Enzua suddenly pulled out the large saber on his back and slashed forward. Emolian's expression changed drastically, and he blocked with his arm. Boom. Emolian instantly retreated tens of thousands of feet, and space-time was destroyed. Seeing this scene, Yi Xian's eyelids twitched. This guy is a bit fierce. That saber just now actually shook the 9th layer of space-time. In the distance, Emolian's expression was extremely ugly. Of course, it was mostly fear. Enzua looked coldly at Emolian. Return to the mountain. This is the last warning. Emolian glanced at Yi Xian beside him, then turned around and left. He was not afraid of Nzua. But behind Nzua was the woman who represented divine Dao Nation. After Emolian and the powerhouses of Spiritual Mountain left, Nzua turned to look at Yi Xian. His Majesty requests an audience. Yi Xian asked, the ruler of divine Dao Nation. Nzua nodded. Yi Xian hesitated, then said, can I not go? Nzua suddenly pulled out the large saber on his back. Yi Xian hurriedly said, go. Let's go now. Nzua nodded. Please. Yi Xian felt somewhat helpless. On the way, Yi Xian looked at Nzua. Why is His Majesty looking for me? Nzua shook her head. I don't know. Yi Xian asked again. Is His Majesty angry that I killed your Princess Ling? Nzua shook her head again. I don't know. Yi Xian thought about it and asked again. Your Majesty. Nzua looked at Yi Xian. Young master, I don't know anything. Even if I knew, I wouldn't tell you. Can you be quiet? Yi Xian. After Yi Xian and Nzua left, Emolian watched Yi Xian and Nzua disappear into the distance and said, this person probably has a backer in divine Dao Nation. Someone is protecting him. A Spiritual Mountain powerhouse said, then what should we do? Our first elder and saint is going to die in vain? After a moment of silence, Emolian said, didn't the divine Marquis's grandson, Wenren, like the saintess? Now that the saintess has been killed, he can't sit back and do nothing. Inform Wenren immediately. Also, use all the connections of Spiritual Mountain and divine Dao Nation to kill this person. The Spiritual Mountain elder nodded. Understood. Emolian looked at the horizon in the distance, and then turned to leave. 1 hour later, Yi Xian and Nzua arrived at the divine Dao Nation's imperial capital. When they arrived at the gates of the divine Dao Nation's imperial capital, Yi Xian was somewhat surprised. This divine Dao Nation's imperial capital was not big. Or rather, it was a little small. At this moment Nzua said, young master, remember, no fighting is allowed in the city. Yi Xian asked, what if someone provokes me? Nzua glanced at Yi Xian. In any case, no fighting. Yi Xian continued to ask, what if someone hits me first? Nzua looked at Yi Xian. Young master Yi, who would hit you for no reason? Yi Xian asked, what if? Nzua said, young master Yi, no one would take the initiative to hit you. You. At this moment, a young man suddenly walked over from the street in the distance. This young man was wearing an embroidered robe and had a sword at his waist. He held a folding fan in his hand. With one look, one could tell that he was a distinguished young master. Seeing this young man, Nzua hesitated for a moment and then bowed slightly. Greetings, young Marquis. Young Marquis Wenren. Wenren ignored Nzua and looked at Yi Xian. Why didn't you kneel and greet this Marquis? Yi Xian pulled on Nzua's sleeve. Didn't you say that no one would come looking for trouble with me? Nzua. At this moment, Wenren smiled and said, not greeting this Marquis is looking down on etiquette, the divine Marquis residence, and the divine Dao Nation. With that he looked at Nzua. Lord Nzua, and Lu, how should we deal with this person? Nzua said in a low voice. Young Marquis, His Majesty has summoned him. Wenren smiled. Did I stop him from seeing His Majesty? What I'm saying is that this person didn't greet me. He has violated the laws of the divine Dao Nation. Nzua frowned when he heard this. How could he not discern that Wenren had come to cause trouble on purpose? Nzua hesitated for a moment, and then looked at Yi Xian. Young master Yi. Yi Xian blinked. You wouldn't want me to greet him, right? Nzua said, just greet him. Wenren looked at Yi Xian and lightly tapped the folding fan in his hand. He smiled but didn't say anything. Yi Xian smiled. He said that the people of the divine Dao Nation must greet him. But I don't seem to be from the divine Dao Nation. Wenren suddenly smiled. But you're standing on the territory of my divine Dao Nation. Since you're standing on the territory of my divine Dao Nation, then you should obey the laws of my divine Dao Nation. Yi Xian gazed at Wenren and smiled. Young master, there's no enmity between us, right? Wenren walked over to Yi Xian and grinned. Don't we have one now? Yi Xian smiled. The last person who asked me to greet her seemed to be called a divine Tao spirit. Right, she's completely vanished from this world now. Wenrinyu's expression instantly turned cold. He took 2 more steps forward and smiled. Come. Hit me. Provocation. Yi Xian suddenly withdrew Xiaota and smashed it down. Bang. Wenrinyu wasn't even able to react before he was smashed into pieces by Xiaota. Everyone here was stunned when they witnessed this scene. Even Enzhua hadn't expected that Yi Xian would suddenly attack. And he hadn't even been able to stop Yi Xian in time. Yi Xian opened his palm, and Xiaota returned to his grasp. He glanced at the spatial black hole that Xiaota had created. Hit you? I'll fucking kill you. As he spoke, he gazed at Enzhua and spoke furiously. I hate second-generation disciples that rely on their fathers and ancestors the most. How embarrassing. If everyone was like me, Yi Xian. Meanwhile, Xiaota suddenly said, Young master, that's enough. I'm very embarrassed. You're the strongest second-generation disciple in the world. So what's there to say? Yi Xian was speechless. P.S. It's the new year tomorrow, so I don't have time to write. What should I do? I haven't stopped writing for an entire year, so I can apply for leave. Brothers. Chapter 1915. Following Wenrinyu's death, the entire street became quiet. Wenrinyu. That was the Divine Marquis Young Duke. What kind of existence was the Divine Marquis Manor? The Divine Marquis Manor's ancestor was one of the founding fathers who followed the Divine Emperor to conquer the world. In order to reward the Divine Marquis Manor's ancestor, Wenrin Tian, the Divine Emperor personally decreed that as long as the descendants of the Wenrin clan did not rebel, they would be exempted from death. But now, someone actually killed the Wenrin clan's young duke. Moreover, this young duke was the Wenrin clan's only son. Things were getting out of hand. Next to Yi Xian, Enzhua's expression was also extremely ugly. Damn it! Why did this guy dare to kill anyone? Was he crazy? At this time, Yi Xian suddenly said, Lord Enzhua, what are you waiting for? Hurry up and bring me to your emperor. Enzhua said solemnly, Young Master Yi, things are getting out of hand. Yi Xian said, That's why we have to hurry up and see your emperor. Right now, only your emperor can protect me, right? Enzhua was speechless. You still know who can protect you. Without further thought, Enzhua brought Yi Xian to the palace. He also knew that only his emperor could solve this problem. He was a little afraid of Yi Xian now. This guy was also a tiger. He dared to kill without a word, regardless of who the other party was. Tiger. The two of them had only taken a few steps when a hunchbacked old man suddenly appeared in front of them. Behind this hunchbacked old man stood 10 experts in dark armor. The Wenrin clan. Seeing this hunchbacked old man, Enzhua hesitated, then bowed slightly. Lord Yu Xian. Yu Xian, the Wenrin clan's housekeeper. However, this was not an ordinary housekeeper. He was once a commander of the imperial army. After leaving the palace, he became a housekeeper at the Divine Marquis Manor. Yu Xian glanced at Enzhua, then at Yi Xian. Without any nonsense, he charged forward and threw a punch at Yi Xian. This punch seemed to contain the stampede of a magnificent army, and a monstrous momentum instantly enveloped Yi Xian. Yi Xian did not retreat. Instead, he took a step forward, drew his sword and slashed. Boom! A sword light shattered, and Yi Xian instantly retreated several thousand feet away. Yu Xian suddenly tapped the ground with the tip of his foot, and he was like a ferocious tiger that had left its cage as he punched straight at Yi Xian. This punch caused the surrounding space to distort and transform into a space-time vortex. In the distance, Yi Xian narrowed his eyes and took a step forward. In an instant, a wave of sword light engulfed him and Yu Xian. Boom! The ground shook violently, and the sword light shattered. Yi Xian retreated another 100 feet. After Yu Xian stopped, he was about to attack again. In the distance, Yi Xian opened his palm, and Xiaota appeared in his hand. Just as he was about to activate Xiaota again, an old man suddenly appeared in front of Yi Xian. Seeing this person, Enzhua heaved a sigh of relief. Musa. This person was the current divine minister Musa. In the Shinto nation, he had great prestige and power. Seeing Musa, Yu Xian did not attack again. Instead, he bowed slightly. Lord Divine Minister. Musa turned to look at Yi Xian, then at Yu Xian. His Majesty has summoned him. Anything can wait until His Majesty has met him. Yu Xian said solemnly, Lord Divine Minister, young Master Yu is dead. Musa frowned. I told you. His Majesty has summoned him. Yu Xian's face turned ugly. Right at this moment, a cough suddenly sounded from afar. Everyone looked over and saw a beautiful woman walking over slowly from afar. Musa's face darkened when he saw this beautiful woman. Yu Xian and the rest quickly went over and knelt down. Greetings, mistress. Situ Jing of the Divine Marquis Mansion was the current ruler of the Divine Marquis Mansion. Situ Jing walked slowly to Musa. Musa hesitated for a while, then bowed slightly. Old man. Situ Jing chuckled. I know that the Divine Marquis Mansion is not the same as before. In terms of power, we are indeed no match for you, Lord Divine Minister. However, the Divine Marquis Mansion is not a place that can be easily bullied. Then, she lightly tapped the walking stick in her right hand. Boom! The ground cracked. And in the next moment, hundreds of shadows suddenly rushed out from all directions. Divine Marquis Guards. Musa's face darkened. These Divine Marquis Guards were the bodyguards of the Divine Marquis Mansion. Even the weakest among them was at the Divine Physique Echelon. At this moment, a group of mysterious experts suddenly appeared beside Musa. There were only 16 of them, but they were all at the Divine Soul Echelon. And these were Musa's own bodyguards. The atmosphere in the surroundings instantly became tense. Situ Jing looked at Musa. Lord Divine Minister, the Divine Marquis Mansion has no enmity with you, and we have never thought of becoming enemies with you. Today the Divine Marquis Mansion only wants to seek justice. Musa shook his head. Old man, he is the person that His Majesty wants to see. Situ Jing glanced at Yi Xian. Why does His Majesty want to see him? Musa shook his head. I don't know. Situ Jing stared at Musa. He killed you, heir. Musa said in a low voice. Old man, let His Majesty meet him first. How about that? Situ Jing was silent. Around them, the experts from the Divine Marquis Mansion stared at Yi Xian. As soon as Situ Jing gave the order, they would swarm him. At this moment, Situ Jing suddenly said, Since His Majesty wants to see him, then let His Majesty meet him first. Hearing this, Musa relaxed a little. He nodded and turned to Yi Xian. Young master, you please. Then he turned and left. Yi Xian sheathed his sword and followed him. At this moment, Situ Jing suddenly said, Young man. Yi Xian turned to look at Situ Jing. Situ Jing stared at Yi Xian. No matter how powerful you are, the Divine Marquis Mansion must take your head. Yi Xian walked to Situ Jing. At this moment, Musa frowned. Young Master Yi, don't do anything rash. Yi Xian suddenly laughed. Lord Musa, didn't you see that she was the one who threatened me first? Musa's expression was cold. Young Master Yi, if you do anything rash, no one can protect you. Yi Xian laughed. Rash? What a joke. The moment I entered this city, the Divine Marquis Mansion came to bully me. Why? Only the Divine Marquis Mansion can bully others, but others can't? Or is it that the law of God country only bullies the weak and fears the strong? Musa stared at Yi Xian. Young Master Yi, be careful with your words. Yi Xian smiled. All right. I will be careful. Lord Musa, let's go. Let's go and meet your Majesty. After saying that, he walked into the distance. Musa glanced at Yi Xian and followed. After Yi Xian and Musa disappeared, Situ Jing suddenly said, Pass down my order. Spread the news that this person killed Princess Ling, and you are. Yi Xian nodded. Understood. As he spoke, his expression became slightly solemn. He knew that old madam wanted to control the public opinion first. But why did he want to control the public opinion? Because this person was not simple. At this moment, Situ Jing asked again, Why did you suddenly find trouble with this person? An expert from the Divine Marquis Constabulary said in a low voice, Old madam, someone informed young master that Princess Ling was killed by that young man. That's why young master came to find this young man. Situ Jing's expression darkened. Spiritual mountain, right? That expert nodded. Situ Jing slowly closed his eyes. His expression was extremely cold. Spiritual mountain, how dare you use the Divine Marquis Mansion? She knew that the Divine Marquis Mansion was being used by the spiritual mountain. That expert said, "Old man, I'm afraid that young man's background is not simple." Situ Jing was expressionless. How can someone who dares to kill the princess of God country be simple? However, no matter who he is, the Divine Marquis Mansion will take his head as an offering to your soul in heaven. Then she turned and left. Soon, the entire Divine Marquis Mansion began to move. The Divine Marquis Mansion's influence in God country was not to be trifled with. Before long, countless officials of God country had already left for the palace, ready to make a statement. At this moment, Yi Xian and Musa arrived at the entrance of the palace. Musa turned to Yi Xian. "Young Master Yi, do you know etiquette?" Yi Xian smiled. "Are you trying to say that I should bow when I see His Majesty?" Musa said in a low voice. "Young Master Yi, only His Majesty can protect you." Yi Xian suddenly said, "My sword is in His Majesty's hands, right?" He could already feel the profound green sword. It was in this palace. Musa nodded. "Yes." Yi Xian smiled and walked into the palace. There was only one woman in the palace. It was the divine Dao Ling. Seeing Yi Xian enter, the divine Dao Ling put down a memorial in her hand and smiled as she pointed at the memorials in front of her. "There are a total of 1280 memorials, and all of them request for your immediate death." As she spoke, she slowly walked in front of Yi Xian and looked straight at Yi Xian. "Little fella, I know that you are not simple, but you are too ruthless. First, you killed a princess of God country. Then you killed the little marquis of the Divine Marquis Mansion. Furthermore, you did not leave any leeway. Even if I wanted to protect you, I would not be able to." Yi Xian said with a smile. "I have never provoked any of your people." The divine Dao Ling blinked. "Is that important?" "It is not. You should understand that reason is built on your fist. If you do not have the strength, you will only be humiliating yourself by trying to reason with me." Yi Xian smiled. "I understand." The divine Dao Ling smiled. "Then tell me, how will you live?" Yi Xian said with a smile. "You should know better than me, don't you?" The divine Dao Ling opened her palm, and the profound green sword appeared in her hand. She looked at Yi Xian and smiled. "Who is the person who forged this sword?" Yi Xian answered honestly. "My sister." "Sister?" The divine Dao Ling's lips curled up. "She is the person behind you, and the reason why you are so unyielding, right?" Yi Xian looked at the divine Dao Ling. "What do you want?" The divine Dao Ling smiled. "Young Master Yi, whether you can live or not depends on how strong the person who forged this sword is." As she spoke, she exerted force in her right hand, and a mysterious force suddenly surged into the profound green sword. Boom! The profound green sword trembled. At the same time, the space before her warped. A few moments later, the divine Dao Ling looked up. A few breaths later, the corners of her mouth curled up. "Young Master Yi, I can sense the person who forged this sword." As soon as she finished speaking, her body suddenly became illusory. In the next moment, her illusory figure passed through countless spaces and arrived at an unknown starry sky. Not far away from her, a woman in a plain dress stood quietly. Not far from her, over 10,000 mysterious experts were kneeling on the ground. Not only were they kneeling, but their bodies were also trembling, and their faces were filled with terror. At this moment, the woman turned around and looked at the divine Dao Ling. "What's the matter?" The divine Dao Ling smiled. "I am the ruler of the divine Dao nation. Your brother's life and death are in my hands." The divine Dao nation? The woman raised her brows. She opened her right hand, and the walking sword appeared in her hand. "Point me in a direction." P.S. A reader's birthday requested an extra chapter. I couldn't refuse. Chapter 1916. Where was the nation of divine Tao? Hearing the woman's words, the faces of the mysterious experts behind her instantly changed. All the experts immediately crawled down, and their bodies trembled violently. They were terrified to the extreme. Over 100 kilometers behind them was pitch black, and even the 10th layer of space had been obliterated. That place was originally their home. 15 minutes ago, the woman in a plain dress had asked them the same question, and 15 minutes later, their home was gone. The divine Dao Ling looked at the woman in a plain dress. Where is my home? The woman in a plain dress shook her head. There's no need for you to point. As she spoke, the walk sword in her hand suddenly flew out. The divine Dao Ling's pupils constricted when she saw the woman in a plain dress attack. Even though it was only an illusion, she didn't underestimate her opponent. When she was about to attack, that seemingly slow sword suddenly stabbed into the space between her brows. Bang! The divine Dao Ling's body instantly became illusory. The divine Dao Ling looked at the woman in a plain dress. I underestimated you. As soon as she finished speaking, her pupils constricted. In the nation of divine Dao, within the imperial palace, a sword stabbed into the space between the divine Dao Ling's brows without any warning. The divine Dao Ling's eyes were wide open, and they were filled with disbelief. How is this possible? That was the first thought in her mind. How could she stab into my body from countless galaxies away? That was utterly impossible. Right at this moment, her body and soul were vanishing at a speed visible to the naked eye. The aura of death caused the divine Dao Ling's mind to clear up. The divine Dao Ling hurriedly looked at Yi Xian. I know Miss Nian. Yi Xian said, Qing, spare her life. As soon as he finished speaking, the sword between the divine Dao Ling's brows suddenly vanished, and the divine Dao Ling's body went limp and fell to the ground. In the unknown starry sky, the woman in a plain dress opened her palm, and a sword light fell into her palm. It was the walk sword. The woman in a plain dress turned to look at the group of mysterious experts before her. Do you want to live? All of them nodded in unison. The woman in a plain dress opened her left hand, and a portrait appeared in her hand. She opened the portrait. My brother. Everyone was stunned. What did that mean? The woman in a simple dress frowned slightly when she saw no one answer her. In an instant, the expressions of all of them turned grim, and the man in the lead hurriedly said, From this moment onward, Senior's older brother is our older brother. No, he's our master. We'll go and follow master right now. With that, he turned around and left with the mysterious powerhouses behind him. The man in the lead instantly heaved a sigh of relief when he saw the woman in a simple dress didn't attack. Damn it! We were almost annihilated. Old man, if you continue to cause trouble for him, then I'll destroy the divine Marquis estate. As soon as she finished speaking, she turned around and left. Situ Jing remained silent, and his expression was extraordinarily calm. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Sword of Destiny YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.